They blend in with the family and it's fantastic.
I love family daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend family daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle? Where's my Scouty snuggle? Can I have a Scouty snuggle? How's your tea party going?
My name's Hilary. I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive of the whole thing and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working family daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance if they have their own child. Family daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride!
More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals. How's that? Is that better? You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers would like that very much.
Goodbye! Through the gate. In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
West Coburg Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club.
We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name's Leslie.
Well, good evening councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's John Kavanagh and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moreland. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's meeting. I've been asked to remind people about the Moreland Awards. Moreland Awards are for all our Moreland residents And if you have someone that you think is worthy of award, a nomination for an award, that's open till September the 7th. And there's details on our website. Our meeting tonight is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and elders from other communities that might be with us this evening. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home, and in doing so they have contributed to the rich, positive diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that the council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live on council's website and to Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during tonight's meeting. Councillors are reminded that in line with the adopted Councillor Code of Conduct principles, as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors will ensure that they conduct themselves at this meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibilities in the interests of the local community, and not to improperly seek or confer an advantage on any person. This behaviour will support the principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. I'd like to introduce the councillors who are in attendance tonight, starting from my right, your left, Councillor Sue Bolton. Hi. Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon. Councillor Helen Davidson. Hello. Councillor Jess Dorney. Over here we have Councillor Alia Farnley. Councillor Dale Martin. Councillor Mark Riley. And Councillor Lambros Tapanos. Officers in attendance tonight, to my left we have the Chief Executive Officer, Dr Norina Di Lorenzo, and then starting from my right we have Grant Thorne, who's the Director of City Infrastructure, Arden Joseph, the Director of Social Development, Kirsten Costa, Director of Planning and Economic Development, and we have Liz Rowland will be here in a few moments. She's the Acting Director of Corporate Services, and then we have Olivia Wright, who's the Manager of Property and Governance, and Anita Caven, who's the Executive Manager of Organisational Development. Councillors, we've received apologies. Just before I ask for a mover of apologies, we've received a request from Councillor Riley for leave of absence from the 31st of July to the 12th of August 2018 inclusive. Councillors, could I have a request for the approval of leave of absence for Councillor Riley? Moved by Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Dorney. Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, I note that Councillor Abood is on leave of absence from the 6th to the 14th of July. Councillors, are there any other apologies from councillors for tonight's meeting? Councillor Farley?
Councillor Yildiz is an apology. He's overseas on a private work-related matter.
Thank you. So that's moving the apology of Councillor Yildiz, moved by Councillor Farley. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bolton. Any discussion on that? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare on any of tonight's agenda? There being none, we'll move to the next item. Councillors, could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes for the meetings on the 25th of May, the 13th of June and the 25th of June 2018? Moved by Councillor Riley. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dorney. Any discussion on the minutes, councillors? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Item 5 is minutes and reports from special committees, which tonight we have none. So we'll move on to petitions. Firstly, councillors. Any councillors around the table have a petition to present tonight? No, so none from councillors. I believe we have at least one in the gallery? Yes. All right. Would you like to stand up to the lectern and speak briefly about your petition, please? Up to the lectern, thank you, Sophia. So over here, thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's very formal.
Yeah, so that's why that way people who are live streaming can hear what you're saying too.
Okay, as a citizen of Moreland, I'm here on behalf of the retailers and citizens who are currently using Page Street Plaza as a walkthrough. Firstly, the majority of citizens I surveyed were not aware that the plaza will reopen to cars. They were alarmed when we informed them that the road will soon be open to both cars and pedestrians, mostly feared for their safety, especially parents with children and elderly. Sharing a pathway with bike riders and cars with no safety barriers for pedestrians, especially when entering and exiting businesses such as the shop Victoria Nails. Parents and with prams and elderly with walking frames, and customers are unable to have clear vision of the oncoming traffic, particularly bike riders and the cars that would be less than a metre away from the doorway. They all fear that their safety and see it as an accident waiting to happen. Our suggestion of placing bollards or planter boxes to make a clear defined walkway was rejected. So we want the road closed permanently as there is no safety barriers for the pedestrians. Workers and customers entering the building will now be in fear of an accident. No worker should be in fear of their safety in the workplace. Due to the limited time before this meeting, the petition was given is a small portion of community opinions. Retailers have informed me that they are happy to continue with the petition and speak to our community.
Thank you very much indeed for the way you put that. Now, we'll have a mover to accept the petition, moved by Councillor Bolton to accept that onto tonight's, and seconded by Councillor Riley. Would you mind presenting it to me now? Would that be right, Sophia?
Maybe to say how many signatures.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Around 400,
right.
It was limited
to it. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
It's now been tabled. Thank you, Sophia. Sophia, do you know if you're the first named petitioner?
I'd say so.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's part of the process. Thank you very much indeed.
Do we need a vote on it?
Yes, I'm sorry. Good point. I'll put that to the vote now to receive the petition. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried, that we've received the petition. All right, so we now move on to public question time. Now, this is an opportunity for 30 minutes for citizens of Moreland to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the reports tonight, this is the time to ask your question. Questions can be submitted online prior to the meeting as well. A maximum of 2 questions is allowed to any one person, and questions that relate to the matters on the agenda will be dealt with first. When I invite you or your representative to ask a question, you must take no longer than 2 minutes to ask the question. I'll ring the bell at 1 minute 45. That means you have 15 seconds left to ask the question. If you have submitted a second question, at my discretion, you may either ask it then or we'll come back to it later. Now, a maximum of 3 questions is allowed on any one subject, and we'll proceed to the next topic, and if time allows, we'll come back to that topic after that. Either myself or another councillor will answer your question, and I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer to either provide a response or refer it to another council officer. As detailed in the meeting procedure local law 3517, as chairperson, I have the right to allow and disallow some questions. All right. Question time can only be extended, councillors, for a 30-minute period and only for the purpose of responding to questions that are related to the matters listed on the evening's agenda. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and responded to between now and the next council meeting. And in next month's council meeting, if there's any of those questions, both the question and the answer will be written in the agenda of next month's meeting. All right, so we have 30 minutes to start, and we'll put that time now, and we'll light it at 7:05. All right. First question I have here is from Joe Petamonti on behalf of Petamonti's Supermarket. Joseph, would you like to come forward and ask your question?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Yes, my name is Joseph Piedimonti, and I operate the supermarket near the tram terminus where Public Transport Victoria are planning tram infrastructure works. The draft parking strategy is on the agenda for this evening. Do councillors think that it is appropriate that the report offers Piedimonti's and McDonald's limited duration customer-only car parking as a solution for the changes to parking in Melville Road due to the proposed tram terminus development program, without there having been any consultation with Piedimonti's and McDonald's in relation to this offer?
Thank you, Joseph, for asking it so succinctly. I'll answer, and if there's any councillor that has a different view, I'm happy to receive that, because it's basically giving our opinion. My view on that is that is unacceptable. My view is that they are private car parks, and therefore it's not for the Public Transport Corporation to indicate that they are used. It'd be like... Okay, so I think we're all in agreement. Thank you so much, Joseph. Good.
Hi, my name is Helen. I live on 201 Melville Road. Hi, my name is Helen. I live on 201 Melville Road. So my question today is just in regard to the PTV project that has been proposed or is going ahead. I'm asking the council for comment. There's a number of residents in this community who feel that consultation has not occurred. My question is whether or not an alternate proposal can be considered.
Okay. Any councillors have a view? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
This is about the tram stop? Yeah. I'm really more giving a personal view rather than a view of the council, because there hasn't been a vote by councillors about the project. But my feeling is, after having visited the area, is that the tram line should be extended into Turner Street and the super tram stop be in Turner Street, where there is a wider sort of area. It wouldn't have as much effect on the residents and the shops. Now, obviously, there's got to be a bit of research and work done about a proposal like that. Historically, there was a plan for the tram to go way up Derby Street. I'm not quite sure how far, but it was never ever built. But certainly after having been to the area when residents have been talking about this proposal, I feel that there are some difficulties in that area, and I say that with interaction of cars and the shops and so forth. Now, I say that as a supporter of disability accessible tram stops, and then obviously do need to be disability accessible tram stops along that road. But I sort of feel as if the terminus should be shifted across the other side of Bell Street, into Turner Street. And yeah, that's just my personal feeling.
Thank you, Councillor.
I don't know. I'm assuming this will come to council for some sort of a vote, because I know that that's what happened with the Nicholson Street tram terminus. Is that right? Am I right about that?
Have you got any information on that? Yeah. I'll go to the Director for information there.
Through the Mayor, just I suppose providing a bit of context to which the residents and shopkeepers no doubt know. The project at Melville Road, the Route 58 tram, is a PTV project, and they're currently undertaking consultation. There was a public meeting last night. There's a further meeting tonight. You might query whether it is consultation, but I won't. There is a further public meeting tomorrow night, and I understand the submissions for feedback close on Sunday the 15th. As Councillor Bolton pointed out, Council will then consider a report. At this stage, it's planned to be the August Council meeting, so it might depend on the consultation and timing to whether it is August or it might be September. And at that point, Council will then form a view on the project, on whether they support it or what other alternatives there might be. But so at this stage, Council has not formed a formal view on the project.
Thank you very much. And I need to apologise. I was thinking that was on the agenda, and so therefore the first question I had parking, I was thinking it was regarding the MITS program. So we'll have to leave the questions for that and deal with questions where they're on the agenda, and I apologise for doing that. And speaking of which, the first is regarding a policy that's coming for tonight. Helen Kratzman, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hi. We know that Council has no control over arterial roads, but it does have a role in advocating for the issues that matter to our community, like speed limit reductions on arterial roads. This is detailed in the MITS Strategy Policy Action 3.1.2, to the great delight of our community who have been campaigning for road safety in the Holmes Nicholson Moreland Neighbourhood Centre for several years. It is because of Council's advocacy, Vic Roads has released a $1.5 million road concept plan for Holmes Street, which extends from Albion up Holmes to Nicholson Street in Coburg, just past the Nicholson building. The plan includes a 40km/h speed limit, threshold treatment where all local roads meet arterial roads, pedestrian lights near Moore Street, and other pedestrian safety measures. You may have read in last week's Moreland Leader that the state government has committed $450,000 to install pedestrian lights near Moore Street within the next 12 months. This is a huge win for our community, and we couldn't have achieved it without the advocacy of Moreland Council. So to all the councillors, the council officers and the executive team that had input, thank you. We require an additional $1 million in funding for the road concept plan to be delivered. Further, the plan does not extend along Moreland Road, nor north up Bell Street, nor north up Nicholson to Bell Street. So we've still got work to do. What assurances can council provide to Moreland residents that it will continue to advocate for speed limit reductions and other safety measures along arterial roads?
Thank you, Helen. All right. Would a councillor like to answer, or I'll go to the officer? You okay to go, Grant?
Through the Mayor, thanks for your question, Helen. The sentiment is there. The Council is considering MITS tonight, which includes, as you've pointed out, an action about that, and I'll leave that for Council to decide which way they vote on that. But reduced speed limits has shown to reduce the seriousness of crashes and the road safety improvements for all users, bikes, peds, and also car users. But it's up to Council as part of considering MITS, and then through the consultation period before it's finally adopted, which at this stage is planned to be in February 2019. What the final form of that takes will be decided in February.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Helen,
you.
and thank you
Thank
for
you.
your And don't forget there's a drink out there if you like, Helen.
It's a big win, I'm pretty emotional.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, Helen. Nick Dolby, please.
Hello, Nick Dolby, Brunswick West. 3 questions, actually. First one is about the MITS strategy.
You're allowed to ask 2, Nick?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll sneak one in.
Yeah, right.
MITS, good idea. Look, it's a comprehensive, well-done strategy, and I must say that it's getting a lot of support from cyclists. So that's a comment I'm passing on. The Nicholson Street super stop, the Nicholson Street accessible tram stop report, though, has made no mention of cyclists whatsoever. Nicholson Street is becoming medium density. It's getting a large amount of development. It's getting commercial developments at ground floor. So it will be a destination for residents and shoppers who will be wanting to access Nicholson Street by bicycle. And yet there is no bicycle infrastructure envisaged for Nicholson Street. And quite frankly, why not? Why not? Last point, recently in the last week, an Indigenous name for the area of Brunswick has been discovered in historical records. I'd just like to bring Council's attention to that.
Really? I wasn't aware. Do you know the name?
It's something like Merri-bek, is, I believe. Yes, it's in the media. I won't take that as a question, because
I think we've got one question there, which is the bikes in Nicholson Street, I think. So basically indicating that bikes have been ignored in that report. Any councillor like to comment on that? Can I go to the director? Director.
Through the Mayor, thanks, Nick, for your question. The accessible stop project on Nicholson Street, again, is a PTV project. The curbside lane is a wider lane than a normal lane. The design is different to what happened at Nicholson Street and Blythe Street in the sense that the bike lane disappeared there. So there are potential future opportunities to include bicycle infrastructure, but the current project, as you point out, does not include a dedicated bike lane over those stops.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that. Cameron Foley, please. Regarding Fleming Park.
Evening, councillors. Evening, Mayor. I'm Cameron Foley. I'm the president of the Brunswick Bowls Club, and I'd first of all like to thank the Moreland Council for all the support you've given to the club over the recent times. Many capital works grants and the like have made a real difference to the ongoing thrivingness of our little club. I'm talking in regard to the Fleming Park Master Plan that's before Council tonight, and I'd also like to extend our thanks to the Council and all of the consultants on the amazing job that they did in pulling together the report. Overall, we believe it's an amazing report with some really great outcomes. There is one thing though, in the report that's before Council tonight, and if I can refer you to page 138, which summarises the submission that the Bowls Club made to the community consultation phase of the program. The dot point on page 138 in regard to car parking, we believe doesn't adequately reflect the rationale and need which was stated in our submission. I have copies for councillors and officers for your reference if you wish. The point we are focusing on is the car parking need of not just our members, but particularly visiting pennant teams, primarily of a senior demographic. The pressure on the current parking space is also compounded by other fixtured sporting events that occur at the park at the same time. Our question is, how would this pressure and need be accommodated given the master plan that is before Council does not consider amendments to on-street parking, which was flagged as a potential solution to such a change during the public consultation phase of the project?
Okay, thank you very much. Any councillor like to answer that one? With the Director, Arden, would you like to answer that one?
Through you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Joseph, sorry.
The Fleming Park process with consultation was quite extensive, and one of the key features in it is there wasn't a universal 100% support of a number of the items, so it was quite evenly split, which made it a little bit difficult. However, there was an overwhelming desire to have as much open space as possible rather than car parks or buildings, and that's an attempt in the report and the master plan to reflect that on balance. There is also a recommendation, if Council adopts it in this report, to conduct a comprehensive traffic and parking investigation. So it's not the end of the road in terms of that topic. That process will be undertaken if Council adopts the report as it currently is.
Our main concern is just that potentially an elderly citizen may have to walk more than 250 metres with a very large heavy bowls bag without adequate parking in the area. So we thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for the way you've asked it. The next question I have is from a gentleman called Paul, who's in the public gallery but would prefer not to ask the question himself, so I'll read it on his behalf. It's regarding the notice of motion tonight, 3118, public housing public meeting, and the question reads, if there is a community picket to defend Gron Place being public housing in Brunswick, would the council support it? Okay. Councillor Bolton, seeing as it's your motion, would you like to speak to that or not? And maybe just give your view if you like.
I could speak to it, but it's not something which has been voted on by council. I mean, certainly, I certainly support the defence of the public housing and Gron Place, Brunswick West. But something like that would have to come to the council. But I certainly think so far the council has been quite good in supporting the public campaign to defend public housing. But you know, I guess we just take it a step at a time.
Thank you. I've got a couple other questions regarding Gron Place. So Barbara. Yeah. Hello, Barbara. How are you?
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you. My question concerns, as a result of my talking with residents that surround Gron Place, and most of them are unaware of the nature of the development. A lot of people just think, oh, what a good state government, they're building more council flats, but that's not the case, as we know. And through talking with local residents, one of the most elderly has informed me that the land was gifted to the poor of Brunswick by Mr. Gron, which I believe adds a moral dimension to all the other dimensions of wrongness to do with this development. And I just wonder, is the council going to do anything about that?
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for the way you've asked it. Councillor Bolton, would you like to answer that one? Maybe. I know you've been strong on this.
Well, it is good to know there's information about the land being gifted. I'm not sure if it's gifted to council or state government, but it also does mean that the campaign to defend public housing on that site is absolutely correct, because private dwellings and private developers should not get hold of that site. It's public land, which should be kept as public land and should be kept for public housing, especially when we've got such a massive, massive housing crisis across this whole country, including Melbourne, including inner city Moreland and outer city Moreland. So I think I've got a proposal on the council agenda for later in the evening to talk about council organising a public meeting, because I do believe a lot of people are unaware, and there was a very successful public meeting at Gron Place, which involved both Gron Place residents as well as neighbours around Gron Place a couple of weekends ago, where around 50 people attended, and there are a number of nearby residents who totally support the people on Gron Place in trying to keep public housing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. I have another similar question from Howard. Howard, good. Thanks for coming.
Look, I'm with the Public Housing Defence Network.
Yep.
We're a group of volunteers supporting public housing tenants, and we also include public housing tenants, so we speak with some authority. We're particularly concerned in supporting Sue's motion because the state government has a program called the Public Housing Renewal Program involving 9 states, including the Gron Place estate in West Brunswick. Across the 9 estates, they're actually selling off roughly 70% of the land for private development. They're rebuilding, apart from the private dwellings, they're rebuilding what's called social housing, but they won't actually commit to making that public housing. So it could be housing which is owned or managed by the housing associations, which are private. And also that social housing is going to have less bedrooms than is what is there already. Now, the fact is that there are big differences between public housing and the housing association properties. In public housing, the public housing tenants have their rent set at 25% of their income. They have security of tenure on an ongoing basis, and everyone who fits within the income criteria is accepted. It's not true with the housing association. So all those points are important. The last point I identified is actually across state government policy. State government has been giving away public housing. Both Labor and Liberal parties have been doing that. They've been giving that away to the housing associations. So we're looking to council to provide support. We're looking for all state local councils in the affected areas to provide support for public housing tenants.
Good. Well, thank you, Howard. I can say Council does have a number of resolutions in support. First of all, thank you for your work and the work of the Defenders of Public Housing. We're very appreciative of that. And Council does have a number of motions that have been passed, a number of resolutions to support residents in that position. And I think when you make this, what you said tonight, we're on exactly the same page as what you are. So thank you very much for your work. All right, we go back now to items that are not on tonight's agenda. We've got a few more moments. I had 2 questions from Bell Melville, and so I can have one more question regarding Bell Melville and David Malloy.
Good evening. I'm David Malloy. I own Malloy Shoe Store.
Yes.
It's been there for 60 years or more. I'm a podiatrist and a shoe retailer. I was interested to know whether the traffic survey that the council did for Public Transport Victoria was done, for that area, was done during the school holidays and only on a Wednesday and a Saturday.
Okay. Thank you. That's a pretty specific, interesting question. Would you have that on hand, Director?
Through the Mayor, I'll take that on notice to look up the actual detail of that, and we can provide that to you after the meeting.
He's very easy to find. He's very large frontage on Bell Street.
Can I say that I heard from Lee Downer that was the case?
Right, okay. And so, in essence, you're saying that's
yes,
not a suitable time to be
not
doing.
adequate. I mean, Wednesday some of the businesses are closed. Saturday is a non-event in that shopping centre. I'm only open for half a day, and so a lot of the businesses aren't open. So it's not an adequate one to based on the use of whether the parking is needed.
Okay, thank you, David.
There's a second question,
Yes,
may
you
I
can.
ask?
Yes, you may.
Yes. What provision will there be for parking or deliveries along Melva Road for shops, the child mining business, etc., for the proposed terminus? There doesn't appear to be too much provision for those things.
Have we been liaised on that type of matter? Yeah.
Through the Mayor, I suppose the design of the stop is currently being consulted, and as I said earlier, Council will then consider a report in either August or September on what our view of the stop is and what parking should or shouldn't be provided and how it's provided. So at this stage, we don't, as officers, we don't have a view which way it is.
Right. Am I right in saying that the thing will go ahead? What we're hearing from Public Transport Victoria, and we'll probably hear more tomorrow night, that it is going to go ahead, and it's August or September to start. And I just don't feel there's been enough consultation. We've only heard in the last 6 weeks that this is going.
No, thank you, David. I'll go to Councillor Bolton. And
to ask you a question, if you don't mind. I was wondering if you can inform Council. I believe, but I'm not exactly sure, that there are some shops that don't have a rear entrance for doing deliveries. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Okay. Mine's one that included. Most my footwear comes in through the front door, and then my clients for podiatry come either on a frame, a walking stick, or walking. If they have to walk a long distance along Melva Road or Spring Hall Parade, they'll get there actually puffed out and say, can I sit down first before I go in to have my feet attended to? I'm out of puff. So if Melva Road is made less accessible, it's going to be worse for both deliveries and for people that come to us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, David. Good on you. Thanks, Mum. I've got one question here, which I think is about Page Street, I think. Is that Anthony Taranto? Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
2 questions there,
That's fine, yep.
The first one is, during the plan of this project, were there any safety issues considered towards pedestrians and office workers who use this area on a daily basis? That's number one. And the second one was, after our meeting on Tuesday, what changes do you plan to implement that our citizens feel safe to walk through Page Street and support the local traders? Thank you.
I'll go to the Director on both, and Ms Costa.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. In relation to the planning for the project, the safety that's been taken into account is consultation with Vic Roads in particular, and the provisions that they've identified there for us to implement is a 10 km/h shared zone signage. That signage isn't yet in place, so that is an element in relation to your second question around safety that will be implemented. In terms of Council's own assessments, as we mentioned at the meeting yesterday morning, the assessments from the number of cars using the space has indicated that the data is too high to close the street at this point, that access is needed. But it also indicated that the number of pedestrians using it is quite high and therefore needed to improve the pedestrian environment. As you can see out there at the moment, there's been a strong delineation of the links between the Russell Street crossing and the Sydney Road crossing, with the planting indicating that connection in Page Street. So they're all the elements around the design and the planning for safety that went into account. And then in terms of the changes, perhaps some of these are elements yet to be implemented yet, but Council will also consider a report more than likely at the August meeting around other elements that might be considered too. But for now, the other elements that have gone into place are the cobbled ramp from Sydney Road to slow vehicles down before they enter the space. We're going to have a presence of local laws officers, and we've also briefed Victoria Police about the changes, because this is a behaviour change plan that needs to occur to introduce the shared space. We will have additional temporary flashing shared zone signage, warning people of the change in conditions in the area. There will be a camera on site to monitor the changes, so we can monitor this and report to Council on how that's progressing. There's also some additional signage that will be located at eye level on the ground to show one-way access and that shared zone as well. And we will continue having regular meetings. We've got officers with the traders at their meeting tonight to also then manage issues as they arise. There are some other elements that we're exploring further to the meeting that we had with particularly the owner of the nail shop the other morning. And one of those is a moon mirror that could be outside the door of the shop, so that before people step out of the shop, they can also see everything that's coming, given the orientation of that door at the moment. And there might well be other elements that Council will consider at August.
Thank you very much, Anthony. But as you know, there will be a report at the August Council meeting now, so and that will be online a week before the Council meeting, so you can have a look at that report too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're all the best. I think I've got time for one more question. John Engelhardt.
John Engelhardt from Fawkner. I had two questions, and they're both cycling related. Yeah. One was regarding the Nicholson Street tram stop upgrades. I'm concerned that there's a lack of detail on actually increasing the cycling infrastructure as part of that. And the other issue that I'm very concerned with is the Bell Street, Melville Road tram terminus upgrade. I actually cycled through that intersection today. So I think something needs to be done, and needs to be done regarding cycling safety through that intersection. So I'd like to know what Council is doing to address both of those issues, Nicholson Street and the tram terminus for the number 58 tram.
Thank you, John. Director.
Through the Mayor, thanks, John, for those questions. In part, I've answered both of those to date already. On the Nicholson Street, I said the report tonight's effectively considering the PTV project to create the easy stops or the accessible stops. And Council will consider a report in August or September on the Melville. I suppose what happens beyond those projects, it's not once those projects are done, that's the end of any consideration of those areas. As I said, the Nicholson Street stop does not include, or I suppose we have plans for that, does not include a dedicated bike lane, but that doesn't preclude consideration of that beyond the Nicholson Street project. And the Melville Road will be part of the consideration of the future report to Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're almost at the end of question time, and we have a couple of 3 questions on Bell Melville. I'll get the questioners to ask the questions one after another, and we'll answer as a group. Anthony first, and then Emma, and then Tim, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillor. I live at 215 Melville, so I'm a private citizen. The question is, has there been any negative feedback from the tram stop at the end of the 19 tram line in Sydney Road? It has an elevated platform and is entirely appropriate for elderly people for ease of access. If there has been no negative feedback on that single tram stop with its elevated platform, will the Council advocate strongly with PTV and the Minister of Transport to say this is the model which would work without disruption at the end of the Melville Road number 58 tram?
Okay.
May I comment just very quickly on that and say it could be done by surrendering 1.7 metres of the footpath on the east side of Melville Road, which at the moment is 4.2 metres and is one of the most underused footpaths in the Council of Moreland.
Well, thank you, Anthony. We will deal with your question because it is quite different to the other ones, I think. So, so it refers to the number 19 tram terminus first of all. Anyone aware of any negative feedback that's been received? Sorry, Director.
Through the Mayor, I don't have any numbers of feedback about the Route 19 tram, but I am aware the tram that stops
at Bakers Road,
and Sydney Road.
Yeah.
I am aware that the tram that stops short when there's an existing tram at the stop does cause traffic issues, and I know Vic Roads look at those sorts of issues. in relation to whether there's other issues of pedestrian access, etc., I don't know that off the top of my head, but as I said, the consideration of the Route 58 stop will be at that future council meeting.
Thank you very much. And Emma and then Tim, please.
Good evening, councillors.
Good evening,
my
Emma.
name's Emma and I live on Melville Road near the tram terminus where Public Transport Victoria are planning tram infrastructure works. This will involve installing an accessible stop, which is absolutely a good thing, but it also involves moving the stop away from bus stops, from shops, from amenities, and includes a major widening of space for tram parking. Noting that the draft integrated transport strategy is on the agenda for this evening and concerns have been raised about the proposed design by over 1,000 members of the community in a petition, will councillors support the community in its advocacy for a more integrated design which achieves accessibility both for the trams and across other transport forms, safeguards the wellbeing and livability of this community, reduces barriers to pedestrian and cyclist movements, which has already been raised tonight, creates attractive and safe streetscapes, noting that PTV are planning on taking away all our nature strips and trees, and very importantly supports the survival of local jobs, local services and local businesses. If the answer is yes to the advocacy, I would like to know how the councillors will provide this support.
I think I can answer that one for you, Emma. At the next council meeting, most likely we'll have a report before us, and that will be the time that council will form its view and what position it takes at that point. So I think you're a month away from finding out council's position, to be honest. Thank you so much. Tim.
Mr. Mayor, I do think it is important to note, and no doubt residents will be well aware, that this is not this is a state government project, not a council project. So we are effectively in the same situation as you are. We're waiting to see what the process will be. We want to have a say and we want to hear the community's view and be able to back up the community's perspective to the state government as well. So it's great to be able to have residents here tonight at this council meeting, but this is going to be a long journey. And I guess we need to raise our voice together to make sure that the state government does listen to what the community wants. So just to emphasise though for everyone else that is listening, it is a state government project, not a council project, but we are going to be determining our position and we would love, and I'm sure I speak for all councillors here, to hear your views, and you are making that loud and clear tonight, and please continue to do that so we can actually get the best outcome for the community.
Can I just add that PTV have told us that Moreland Council do play a part as a responsible authority for part of the project.
Okay, and I assure you, Councillor Taploss, Emma has shared her views by email on a number of times now, so thank you very much, Emma. And Tim Beaumont.
Yep, thank you. And thanks for the comments there about the council's role in relation to state governments too. And I do actually think that many of the people, everyone here really, who has got questions and concerns about this is aware of who has the brief, and we have been seeking input from the state government. We haven't really been receiving much in the way of responses, but we have been certainly working to engage state government. But yeah, good morning. Goodness me. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Yeah, my name is Tim Beaumont, also a resident of Melville Road and a passionate supporter of accessibility, of public transport and of public transport development. My question also then concerns the Tram 58 terminus development, and with particular reference to the large number of concerns about the consultation process that have been raised with Public Transport Victoria, with local representatives, with the Ombudsman and with others, and with reference to tomorrow's community information session being led by PTV in an inaccessible upstairs venue on Bell Street. Do the councillors have confidence that the consultation process led by Public Transport Victoria with reference to the Tram 58 terminus development has been adequately inclusive and adequately fair?
Okay, I'm happy to answer that. Just from general experience, my experience is that statutory authorities don't do public consultation very well, to be honest. I think when they say local government is at the closest level of the people, I think that's very clear in public consultation meetings. I was surprised also that the meeting was being held in the dance hall as such, in an inaccessible area. I was surprised at that. And I'm I'm unsure as to how much further consultation is planned, but at this point I think it's been insufficient. Thank you so much. All right. Councillors, that concludes public question time, and we now move on to council reports. We've dealt with every question that was listed. All right, so the first report we need to consider this evening, councillors, is DSD. And thank you, so before that, thank you to the Public Gallery for the way in which you ask tonight's questions and the way in which you handle it. Thank you so much. We deal with DSD 1718, Final Fleming Park Master Plan, and this is a council action plan item. Councillor Dorney, are you moving it?
I'd like to move.
Okay. Just give people a chance to move, and we'll just wait on that for 1 second. Now, we have a mover for the item in Councillor Dorney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Riley. No? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
I rise to support the officer's recommendations and endorse the implementation of this plan. I think that it's a fantastic plan for the community and really sets forward a great vision for reimagining this park and really enhancing what we do have in the space and working with the community to work out ways that we can really build on existing buildings, make sure we don't increase additional footprint of buildings, but also enhancing the public open space that we do have. I think that although nothing's set in stone tonight with this plan, it creates a really strong base and set of principles for how we move forward in working with the community around implementing these actions. You know, creating more usable, accessible and sustainable buildings, enhancing the public space, as I said, reimagining the grandstand, which is something which was looking like the community didn't support, but I think with how it has been proposed and the real vision that has been put forward, there's it's really, people have changed their tune and are really excited about reimagining that space. I think even though this plan, we can never meet 100% of the needs of people in our community every time, I think this is a well-balanced viewpoint that is seeking benefit for the broader spectrum of our community, of diversity of ages and a diversity of the types of people in terms of accessibility and types of users, from people using the space actively to people walking their dogs, getting around on public transport, sports users like the bowls, and passive spaces as well for people just to enjoy, sit under a shady tree when it's hot, which I liked doing at Fleming Park. I would just like to touch and thank the community for some of the feedback and input on a few of the changes that were made as a result of that feedback. Council is going to look into a community garden being considered on the site, which I think is a great value add. So thanks for the community for providing that input. We're looking at a multi-sport court option, so a full multi-sport court option, which really creates further space for younger people to be able to play sport and access sport, both, you know, looking at netball and basketball as well. In regards to the traffic and parking, just building on Grant's comments around, the community has chosen that the priority is open space. I do understand that parking is a contentious issue, and we need to, which is something that is really highlighted quite clearly in this plan, we need to bring the community along in our demonstrous move away from our car-dependent community and to more sustainable modes of transport. The idea of making sure that we do have accessible parking and loading zones available beyond when we do remove car parking. And yeah, I'm talking way too much.
Thank you.
But yeah,
Thank
support
you.
it.
Thank you, Councillor. The second, Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, in seconding the report, I just want to acknowledge the fact that we've actually deferred this plan for some months. In fact, it's almost 12 months since we moved to refresh this at great expense to our budgets, but also to allow us to engage and to work up a better plan. So I'm really grateful to the people who joined the reference group and all the different users of the park. It's a very well-used park under a lot of pressure, which has already been raised. And I want to thank Cam for his role in that and other participants in that and the questions he's asked tonight around it as well. We do want to have more open space. There are some people advocating that we get rid of more of the buildings, but I'm not hearing that from the vast majority of people in the area who've been consulting around that. I think we're kind of getting the balance right. And we have set the directions and the guidelines on all of these matters that are still to be finalised. So this is drawing a line in the sand, but it's not the red line. We'll actually be working on the reducing the parking and getting that clarified, particularly around deliveries and drop-offs and disability access. I can assure you, if I've anything to do with disability access, we'll be quite, council will be committed to making sure that that happens. And we are doing a survey of the whole park to ensure that accessibility for wheelchair users and others is going to be part of that as well. The other parts of the plan that we're also looking to address are things to do with the grandstand, whether we keep it or not, and if we keep it, well, I think the plan is that we keep it, but work out how we're going to repurpose it. And then there are other issues around landscaping and just articulating the built form as opposed to the oval and the open space. So we will be inviting, much of the direction's been set in this plan, and I thank everyone for their input into that. We want to make sure that when we actually come back to addressing each of those in turn, and there will be other issues there too, I haven't covered off on all of them, that the report addresses them and that we will be asking and engaging with you, users, tenants, occupants and the community around that, because we want to make sure we get it right. I think there's an amendment coming to this around the timeline, but it does address the short-term, medium-term and in long-term aspects of the park, and we're investing millions of dollars into getting this going. And during that time, we will have to check in, and because of the pressures in that period, the time that we're looking at the moment, I think, is 15 years, that the population is expected to double. So we will have to come back and readdress some of these matters as we go on. It would be foolish for us to think that we couldn't. So I really want to commend everyone for their input and look forward to further discussions around it. And also just about how we manage the park. That's a question that's been raised as well, and we need to get better at managing the park and maintaining it as well.
Councillor O'Farnley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to add an additional point 3 if the mover and seconder would like to accept, and that essentially puts the time frame, the change really being the time frame currently for long term is 10 plus years, and changes to 10 to 12 years to give it some clarity as to when those projects will be due.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? Yep. So that it gets incorporated and becomes a substantive motion. So we now have 3 points to consider. Are there any speakers against the item? Any other speakers like to speak for? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just be brief because I concur with all of the comments that have been mentioned by my South Ward councillors. But just to highlight that the community has been waiting for this investment in Fleming Park for a long time, and I know the consultation this round has been going for a year, but it was really in our capital works budget for works to be undertaken about 4 years ago, and it got delayed, and there was a reworking, and we've ended up where we are today. Of course, not everyone is going to be happy. It is a great park, it is well utilised, and it has a number of different usages within that. But I do believe that this final plan is a good compromise and a good solution that would please all of the users of Fleming Park. But having said that, I do recognise that our population in and around Fleming Park and Brunswick East is growing rapidly, and we do need more green spaces. And I do urge this council to have a look at how we can increase the green spaces in that vicinity and utilise the open space levy, that is a contribution from developers, to creating more open space for our community. And I'm very pleased to see the additional dot point from Councillor Ali O'Farnley, because we've been waiting way too long for this, and it should be a priority, and our community would like to see it completed as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any further speakers on this item? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. The next report to consider is DSD 1818, Final Charles Martin Reserve Precinct Plan. Once again, this is a council plan item. And are you moving the slight alternative recommendation?
I'm moving with an additional point, same wording as the previous one. If I have a second, I'm happy to.
Okay, so the officer report with an additional point. And point 4, yes, seconded by Councillor Bolton. So moved by Councillor Farnley, seconded by Councillor Bolton.
No, it's on.
Oh, sorry, are you okay?
And Olivia wanted to second.
Oh, okay, all right, Councillor Carley-Hannon. So moved by Councillor Farnley, seconded by Councillor Carley-Hannon. Yep.
Thank you. When I joined council, this was, I think, my first ever general business item, actually, the Martin Reserve Master Plan. So I'm proud to see about 18 months later it finally looking like being adopted. It's a really important project. Truthfully, one of the reasons why I ran for council was I just felt like Fawkner was getting a little bit lost in a lot of it. And so this was, the purpose of this master plan was really to put a little bit of structure and clarity around when some of the projects in Fawkner are looking to be delivered. It isn't necessarily about bringing projects forward. It hasn't really achieved that in any way. It just provides a lot of clarity and a real clear time frame as to how these projects will roll out. And some of the key headline items are, public toilets, drinking fountains, netball pavilions being upgraded, cricket pavilion upgrade, tennis pavilion upgrades, tennis court resurfacing, the fencing, the upgrading picnic area, sport field resurfacing, irrigation works, and all of that will start rolling out over the next 12 years. I'm a strong believer that these are the core council projects that we need to focus on, these community facilities. I'm a big believer in them. I've been to a number of the football games at Martin Reserve and seen it do wonders for social cohesion and a whole range of different community members coming together. So these are really, really critical, and this is where we need to be putting the bulk of our money where possible. The last thing I'll say is, look, I did receive a phone call earlier this week from Anthony, the president of the tennis club, and I was pretty sad to inform him that the facilities for his projects are in the long-term projects. They're a long while away, over a decade away. It's not easy to inform a president of a sports association that we're not going to be able to get to his project for another decade. It's not easy for him to sell his services to juniors coming through the ranks that you're going to have to play in the existing facilities for another decade without us touching it. So what I'll say is the best thing that we can do is work really hard to roll these out as quickly as possible, and I know over the next 2 years the more money we free up for capital works within our sporting and community facilities, the quicker that these projects can be rolled out. So hopefully their strong patience continues over the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you. The second, Councillor Carley-Hannon.
So I rise to concur with the points of Councillor Farnley and also to commend his work on Martin Reserve, and I agree that this is, to me, core council business, and it's one of the main reasons that I too chose to run for council. For me, these community facilities, not only for the sport but also for social cohesion and opportunities to bring a diverse range of people and age groups together, is why these kind of facilities are so important. When it came to Martin Reserve, the first time that I had a look at it, I just thought back to growing up near Gillen Oval and the changes that our council has done over there. And for me, I just think that making sure that the footpaths are all linked, that people can cycle and walk and ride around, and that fencing is low and visible, and people can actually have all the different sporting facilities coming together in a way that actually works in terms of the building and facilities, not just what the residents are doing, because the sporting clubs there, in very difficult circumstances, are working really hard together. However, it is without a doubt that their facilities are not up to scratch, and they do look a little bit tired, and this does influence their ability to really engage the community and make the most of it. So whenever we see a really decent upgrade, it really does benefit not only those that use it on a regular basis, but all of the residents and the people that come to those sporting clubs. And I do hope that we will find the money to actually bring some of these projects forward.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. It's a long-term project, so anyone would like to speak to it, either for or against? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I think this is, well, certainly we had the C.B. Smith Reserve. I think probably in Fawkner there has been a neglect of the south of Fawkner, and I think this report, this precinct plan addresses that, although I certainly share the frustration about it not being able to be, or significant parts of it not being able to be delivered in a quicker fashion. But certainly I think at least the work's been done, and the plan to start the project and at least carry out some of the work in the short term, I think is really important. And certainly I think in that southern Fawkner area, I think there is a real need for a lot of work in that area, and I am pleased to see that some of the pedestrian works in Tyrrell Crescent, where there's no actual made footpath, will be in the short term. But, you know, there are many issues that need to be addressed as part of this whole precinct plan, and hopefully we can free some money up earlier so that we can move some more elements of this further forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further discussion on this? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to the next report, DSD 1918, Strategic Advocacy Plan Adoption. Moved by Councillor Martin. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Riley. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Martin?
I would. Thank you, councillors and members of the gallery. Strategic advocacy is hugely important for council. We are representatives of our community, and as part of that, it is our role to advocate to the state government to see things happen in the broader state, but also in the city, and we need to see things happening. And I really do hope that any candidate for the next state election, whether it be Brunswick or Pascoe Vale, or, you know, a Brunswick member running for Pascoe Vale, anyone that is running for either of those seats, pick up our advocacy priorities, look through the list and listen to what the community wants. We have some really fantastic initiatives in here. Some things we're asking for state government to legislate change. Some things we're asking for financial assistance. And they will all be hugely beneficial to our community. Things like the Wheatsheaf Community Hub. Council have put forward a position for the Upfield line. We want to see a whole of line solution, not this one or two sort of approach. When we're doing this, let's be logical about this. Let's spend taxpayer money in the most efficient way, and let's get these things done in one big project. Let's look at revitalising Sydney Road. Let's do things like introducing a cash for containers scheme where you get 10 cents for your cans when you go to the supermarket. Those things are not just fantastic environmental initiatives, but they're actually hugely financially beneficial for council, especially with the waste issues that we've got going on at the moment. Looking at further public transport works, duplication of Upfield line from Gowrie to Upfield, looking at extending the number 19 tram, looking at speed limit reductions across Moreland as part of our advocacy work. These are all things that we want to see because this is what our community is asking us for. So I really do encourage councillors to support these advocacy priorities, but also encourage everyone out in the community to really go to the candidates at the next state election and demand this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley.
Yes, very pleased to be able to stand and speak to this. This has been something I've been waiting for many, many months, since getting elected in October 2016. So it's a really succinct one-pager. People can read this and digest it in fairly easy fashion. However, there's a lot that underlies this, and Councillor Martin's already touched on many of the important ones. The good news is that 2 of them have been completed already. And one of those is the Upfield Shared Pathway project, and that's partly because of the work and the endeavours that the staff and the whole of council and previous councils have given to trying to get that, and many members of the community, some are sitting here this evening, the Moreland Bug and other community groups that have been advocating around this, the Bug being the bicycle users group. Also the City Oval refurbishment has been completed as an item, so it's great. We've already taken off our list of 16 items, we're down to 14 already, so you could say that we're actually on a good wicket so far. There are a number of other things in here that are rather exciting to me. I just want to touch on implementing our Mutton Reserve Master Plan is there in the bronze section. We've actually got them rated as gold projects, silver projects and bronze. So down in the bronze, unfortunately, I would have liked to see this up in a silver or gold ranking, but you know, you don't always have your way as a councillor. So we're going to do this thing called inclusionary, where we're advocating for inclusionary zoning to support affordable housing developments. Now, with my affordable housing cap on, this is something that rather excites me. South Australia's government has actually managed to do this and implement this inclusionary zoning amendment across its state. And it's allowed larger developments, medium and larger developments, not all developments, but those that actually have significant investment in them, to introduce affordable housing, something that we're all crying out about and there's a lot of debate and discussion about. I won't going to go into that this evening, except to say that we councils would not be in this position if federal governments had properly funded public housing and social housing for the last 20, 25 years. If state governments had properly funded public and social housing for the last 20 to 25 years, we would not be here advocating for this. But as it stands, we as a local government have to do our bit and to lift our game. We've just introduced a housing trust in the last 6 months. We need to get that work going. But this is just another example where Moreland are out there asking for a whole of city approach to all of the people in our community, regardless of their status and income. There are many other things in this report that are exciting around getting our aquatics facilities happening, and getting a new secondary school north of Bell Street, as well as reducing some of the issues related to our waste and so on. And just finally, our regional strategic plan is also incorporated because we're working with other councils around airport rail links and many other issues too. So I'd urge people to have a look at that, and I commend the report and thank the officers for all their work and effort on it.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do we have any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCI 1818, Draft Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy and Draft Parking Strategy released for consultation. Councillor Davidson is on her feet.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendations with a slight amendment. And the amendment is to delete 3.1.1 and 3.1.2 and make the other necessary minor changes. Okay, so 3.1.1. Okay, is everyone clear on what's being moved there? Do we?
Is it something different to what was circulated?
No, I don't think so.
Well,
is it?
She's delete both of those points. It's not to replace them with anything.
No. Right. And then, okay, to delete both of those points. Okay, right, okay.
So nothing in respect.
So, yeah, okay. And then their numbering would change accordingly.
Well, if there is, just through the Mayor, if there is also a second statement that says to make adjustments to the document to reflect these deletions, then that would mean we flow that through.
Yeah, fine, okay.
That's right.
All right, okay.
And
right.
if I'll have a seconder.
Okay, I'll just see if we've got a second. Councillor Cullihan, and you do have a seconder. All right, Councillor Davidson.
Okay. So just to address the deletions, that deletes the reference to reducing speed limits in Moreland to 30 kilometres an hour. The reason for me putting this forward is I believe it's up to the community. This is a draft consultation and it's a draft plan, and we want to hear back from the community about these points. So to go to the substantive report, it's a very well written report, something that I'm quite proud of all the work that officers have put into. It's drawn some preliminary findings from it, and some of the key points that that stakeholders and community members have raised with us is that they want to see a moorland where sustainability and livability and safety are at our heart when we're devising our plans in relation to transport strategies and parking as well. So I would encourage the community to really get involved, to go through this plan, because there's parts of it that will be quite transformative for our area, and to really consider what we're putting forward, and to put your views forward, your opinions, and please give us your feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Cully-Hannon. Okay. All right. We've had a speaker for the motion, and would you have any speakers against the motion? Yes, Councillor Riley.
Yes, I'm really very disappointed to have to be able to rise and speak against your motion, Councillor Davidson. I too think this report's an excellent report, and it's been months in the making, and we've written it based on the input from our communities. And to actually move this motion now, which actually moves against the input of our community, actually quite disturbs me greatly. It also disturbs me because this process is going to go through another iteration of democracy, engagement and consultation. And to take these options out of the report actually removes a whole shift in our city that other cities are taking, not just in Melbourne but around the world, because of the congestion, because of the parking problems, because of the huge population increases and pressures on our city. So I'm incredibly disappointed that this is being moved, and that's why I rise to speak against it. The whole report is meant to be a whole of city report. It's about bringing and the report says this, it's a report for one city. The report is about trying to address all these pressures on us, and to make sure that we as a city are able to work for the next 10 years to get the sorts of things and outcomes that we need. It's actually trying to get lots of goals going around sustainability, livability and safety. And the move towards 30km/h local roads speeds would be a really important move. The evidence is very clear that the difference between 40 kilometres and the 30 kilometres means that it's the difference between life and death. And I'm really quite amazed that you should actually...
Hang on. Just speak to the motion.
I'm really quite amazed that the motion would have those options taken out of it when we could actually be addressing this here and now and allowing our community to actually debate it and consult on it. But to not let the community even consult on it just mystifies me. I'm actually sort of short for words, actually.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Hang on. Okay, you want to speak in favour of the motion?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so I rise to speak in favour and congratulate Councillor Davidson on her words. Firstly, I'd like to say that this strategy is excellent, and I think that we are putting it out for consultation, and as it stands, it actually is speaking with a lot of the thoughts of residents, also recognising that in this consultation process, residents can bring forward any kind of ideas that they might have or any kind of amendments that they would like to see in this current strategy. So firstly, safety on our roads is very important to our council, and we need to consider what is reasonable and necessary for all our road users. We're currently rolling out a 40km/h speed limit on all our local roads. This is a change from the 50km/h that is statewide. We are only 40% through this rollout. Let us finish this rollout and assess how it has changed community expectations and mode shift. It has seen a cultural change for residents, has had a significant impact with significant benefits to our street, and one of the most significant being that at 50km/h there is an 80% chance of fatality, whereas at 40km/h it is 26%. This is a statistic for someone once they are hit, but it is important to also note that the chance of someone being hit when someone is driving at 40km/h is greatly reduced, and research that I've been doing this week has actually demonstrated that it is rare. Many moorland roads already have speed calming measures, such as speed humps and other measures that ensure that 20 to 30km speeds are actually on those roads. These speed calming measures are on roads that have been implemented that have been deemed dangerous or at risk of speeding by residents. Meeting community expectations when going out to consultation is critical to ensure a constructive process. Equally, achieving community expectations and support for speed limits reduces any criticism, and the need to encourage better safety awareness by changing attitudes towards speeding is essential for actually ensuring that we have those speed limits addressed. Arterial roads are actually one of the major causes of accidents and are a perfect example of where we need to strike a right balance between pedestrian safety and having roads that are usable as arterials. To me, this means supporting 40 kilometres on those dangerous intersections while still allowing 60 kilometres an hour on roads such as Bell Street, Melville Road and Nicholson Street that are important arterials for many of our residents to commute. A study by the Grattan Institute shows that workers with long and very extensive commutes have the worst outcomes in terms of work-life balance. So this, for us, is about striking the right balance, and as Councillor Davidson said, we're only putting it out for consultation and would appreciate the feedback from residents.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Martin, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I stand to speak against these amendments. What we asked for as part of the council plan, so one of the first things that came up was a demonstrable shift to mode transport in line with what we want to see, our zero carbon strategy for 2040. We want to see people moving out of cars. What we also wanted to see was we wanted to see the rat run eliminated. There are so many kids, and as a child, I was able to go out on the street and play cricket with everyone in the street. The kids of Coburg don't have that opportunity because there are people hooning through the streets. And what the MITS does without this amendment is it slows down speeds on local roads and makes it quite frustrating for drivers and forces them out to arterial roads. It eliminates the rat run. What this removing does here is it encourages the rat run. It keeps the rat run at status quo. What it does is it ignores all the people in our city who have died on arterial roads. This is something that we have to implement these measures because people are dying on our roads. And to say that we're not going to advocate to the state government to reduce speeds on arterial roads from this point forward is quite irresponsible. I cannot strongly, and I feel so emotional about these changes. What I would like to do is I would like to foreshadow a slightly mediated version of this amendment, and that is to only suggest rolling out 30 kilometres an hour to the 40 zones existing, which is predominantly in the south, and then receive a report back to council to hear about the benefits of slowing traffic down in the cities. So I really do strongly urge my fellow councillors to vote against this amendment and to vote in favour of further study, a further trial that examines the benefits of slowing speed down on the safety of people in our city. Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're foreshadowing that if this is unsuccessful, you'll put an alternative that will indicate.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. All right, are there any other speakers either for or against? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I'll speak against for a couple. Well, I've got a couple of points. One new point, as well as on points which have already been made. I feel as if one of the problems is a bit of a one-size-fits-all. When I think there are certain places where it is totally appropriate to have a 30 kilometre an hour speed limit and others where it might not be appropriate. I actually think some of the really congested small local roads, a lot of them are in Brunswick, but some are in Coburg, where the cars on both sides, you can only fit one car through. Some of those places, the car parking naturally reduces the speed, but not necessarily enough And some of those areas, I feel that if you're going at 40 kilometres an hour, you can't stop in time if a small kid darts out between the cars because you don't see them fast enough. And we all know that a lot of small kids chasing a ball run across without noticing. There are other local roads, I can think of some in Glenroy and Faulkner, where I think reducing to 30 kilometres an hour, you wouldn't get compliance because they're not as congested, and I think it would be ridiculous to change those to 30 kilometres an hour. But I do think there's some places, I do think we should be looking at some places which are appropriate for 30 kilometres an hour. And then the second deletion is about reduction of speed on arterial roads near schools, hospitals, activity centres, transport interchanges, pedestrian areas and along cycling corridors. I feel, it doesn't specify what speed it should be reduced to. We've already got speed reduced to 40 kilometres an hour on Sydney Road. I feel that should be left in because there are demands from residents in high pedestrian areas around particular areas, like certainly the corner of Moreland, Nicholson, Holmes Street, for reduction in speed there because of traffic pedestrian accidents which have resulted in deaths. So I sort of feel that should not be taken out. On another issue which councillors haven't raised, I've also got some concerns about the parking strategy that's part of this motion, about a shift away from minimum parking requirements in developments to maximum parking requirements. Now, some places that might be fine.
Sorry, you've got a few more seconds. You can finish off. You can finish up, councillor, if you like.
Well, I'll just finish quickly. I'm willing for that to go out to public consultation, but I've got big concerns because I think all of what will happen in the absence of extensive improvements of public transport, it just shifts blue-collar workers, people who need to use a car to get to work, out of Moreland. It basically means we're preferencing people who work in the city in professional jobs who've got the who work in a job where it's easy to catch public transport and cycle to work, and workers who work in the outskirts, like in Campbellfield. A lot of bosses won't employ you if you don't own a car. I mean, that's just the reality, and I think we're sort of, I think there is a certain amount of social engineering going on. I'd like to think about it a bit more, and I'm willing for that to go out to public consultation to see what the community thinks, but I've got concerns about it.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak? Councillor Dorney.
I'd also like to rise to speak against Councillor Davidson's motion to remove these 2 points. I'm quite baffled as to how we're actually even standing here having this debate. The evidence, the international evidence on something which is being proposed in a bold and fantastic, highly innovative strategy for community consultation on something that is shown to increase safety, increase the chance of someone surviving if they're hit by a car, increase the chances of people actually getting out and walking and cycling our streets. The difference, speaking to Councillor Carly Hannon's statistic around if people, the difference between 50 kilometres and 40 kilometres an hour. So, of course, 40 kilometres is better. People are 26% less likely to die if they're struck at 40 kilometres. But if we look at the statistic of actually just dropping at 10 kilometres, which evidence has just shown on the trial at City of Yarra to take people in the car 12 more seconds on top of their travel time, we are actually, the chances of someone dying in that collision is less than 10%, 3 times the amount for 10 kilometres. and we're refusing to put that out to community consultation. I don't see why we can take some points out and leave other points in. Like, it's a draft. We're here for feedback. Let's get the feedback and see what the community has to say. One last point, I have many, but one last point before the bell rings.
No, you've got plenty of time. You've got a minute.
Oh, do I? No. Now I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
One last.
Oh, yes. So 40 kilometres, we're 40% through the rollout of that. That hasn't happened overnight. It's taking years. It has taken years. It will continue to take years. 30 kilometres will take years. It is something that we will be ready for, the transition of 30 kilometres with the vision that we're putting forward for our city. And the strategy, it clearly sets out that the South are ready for things that maybe the North aren't ready for yet. But that doesn't mean that we dismiss the needs and dismiss rolling out measures that promote equity for our community and actually promote safety and health and well-being and connection, because I don't know why. So I'm baffled as to why these points have been removed, and no way I could support it for those reasons and many more. Happy to talk more.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
And just to clarify for Councillor Riley and Dorney, the reason why the amendments are put in now, because I think there was a question on should we go to consultation first as a whole or now. It was actually on the advice from the executive during the briefing that we should have the debate now to give the community a bit more clarity. So just to sort of answer that question. Do you support developers in Brunswick and Coburg being allowed to build 10-storey buildings with no car parks? That's what's being proposed in this small integrated transport strategy, and I'm really concerned that we're going to let developers get away with a whole lot and not provide proper car parking facilities for the residents that actually move into those areas. We need your feedback now. It's really important that you provide your feedback as to what you think. The council is split on this. Some believe it's a good idea, some believe it's not a good idea, but we need to hear why you think and what you think so we can make sure we make the right decision. These developers will get away with putting in 10-storey buildings with multiple apartments and no car parks. I'm not sure how those people are going to get around other than having to park on the street and filling up the streets with people that actually live in the area and causing a whole lot of disruption for people in Brunswick and Coburg. So it's really important that we hear from the community as to why this should not go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Tapanos, did you want to speak at all or not?
Yes. I just wanted to emphasise that there is a lot in these two reports, and there's a number of different elements to them. So I am seeking, I guess, that we hear loud and clearly the community's view. And I do think that it is important to isolate a couple of issues that may dominate the headlines and actually grab all the attention and really take away from all the other recommendations and all of the other actions that are in the integrated transport strategy. Councillors, part of the objective of the strategy is also to look into the future and for the direction of resources from both state, federal and also council in regards to transport in our municipality. I don't think the debate should only be dominated by speed limits on arterial roads. So I think that is a broader piece of work that needs to occur into the future. We need to assess exactly where we can actually do that on a case-by-case basis. So I think it is probably wise to remove it from the draft strategy at this point to enable a greater discussion of all of the other issues. And that one issue, which is quite important, can be dealt with through subsequent reports and actions on a case-by-case basis. And I do think that we do need to assess how the 40-kilometre speed limit is going. To propose that, for example, a street like Bell Street can go directly to 30 kilometres is probably not going to be taken up with a level of seriousness by the community as it should potentially in the future, or as it should in certain areas of Brunswick East where it's really popular and needs to occur. So I do think that needs to be taken there. In regards to the other very important issue that has been raised on the car parking strategy, no, I don't agree that a developer should be able to get zero car parking developments, and we are seeing a congestion problem, we are seeing a car parking problem, and I believe a large reason for that problem is actually car parking waivers being granted to the development community. And we all know that even though people say they're going to cycle or walk and not own a car, but they do get visitors, but they do have a requirement to have car parking places. So I think this is a major problem, and this concept of not providing sufficient car park has led us down the path, and we are seeing the negative circumstances and the negatives in traffic congestion that we see in Brunswick, particularly in Brunswick at the moment. So I think that this strategy should also direct some of our investments. We heard earlier on in question time from the Nicholson Street residents about the campaign they're running. It's about getting state investment, and we should be matching that with the $1 million to make sure that we have traffic calming measures to manage traffic in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'll just have a couple of words on prior to the mover having the opportunity to close the debate if she feels like doing so. Number one, can I make the point that there's 2 points in dispute tonight? In fact, I think from memory there's 124 items in the report, and 122 of them, I think as a council, almost invariably, we feel as though they should be go out to consultation. So although there's been focus, of course, on the things that we're disagreeing on, the vast majority of things in the report are agreed on. And when I say agreed on, to go out for consultation. You'll notice also that on one of the points is that on September the 1st, all councillors are in attendance to receive the submissions. Normally when we have receiving submissions, we have a small group of councillors who receive the submissions. We realise that this is important, and so therefore all councillors need to attend to hear the submissions from the public. And yes, if this motion is successful tonight, it doesn't mean that the final draft cannot include some of the items that were mentioned by other councillors. It's simply that this is what we're going out with for consultation. And in fact, in many ways, if it's probably removed, people will feel more compelled to put their views because they realise that the council has to be convinced of it. So that's regarding the parking requirements. It's important that that's only in activity centres, and that's a minimum requirement. It doesn't mean that an applicant doesn't have to, won't provide parking. It means that if people who are moving into that area don't want car parks, they don't have to have them, right? It also means, of course, that they'll be built after the date in which parking permits are available to people who occupy those places. So people will be aware that they don't have access to a parking permit and they don't have a car park. I'm sure the market will decide whether someone wants it. I want a car park, so I won't buy one of those units, whereas other people who don't see the need of having it, that's the idea. All right? So it's not that they can't provide car parking, it's not, and it's only in activity centres. It means it's not compulsory in those instances. But once again, this is a draft. It is a very long draft. It's 195 pages. Tonight, most of the debate has focused on 3 or 4 lines in that 195 pages. Most of the things I think Council is unanimous on. But of course, on this particular one, there is disagreement clearly. That's enough from me, I think. Councillor Davidson, as the mover, you're entitled to close if you wish.
No, there's no need. It's going out for consultation.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just to be clear, councillors, we have one motion before us, the motion that was moved by Councillor Davidson and seconded by Councillor Carly Hannon. Everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay.
Is it possible to split the 2 contentious points away from the rest of the myths, and then if
I'm happy to do that.
Up, then we can foreshadow the alternative.
So we're looking. So your suggestion would be that we move points 1, 2, and 3 first, and then 4 and 5. Am I right? No, hang on.
So we everything apart from
no,
so
sorry.
we endorse the
So we'll leave point 1.
That's right.
Yeah. So councillors, we're going to vote on points 2, 3, 4, and 5 first. Am I correct on that?
Yes, correct.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Are we clear, councillors? And then we'll vote on point 1 after that.
Okay, I know it's unusual to do the later ones first, but they're the ones that we seem to have total agreement on. So, okay, so we're going to vote on points 2. I'm sorry, did I just say point 2 again?
So, Mr Mayor?
Yes?
Is it possible to actually vote on one first in its 2 components,
okay,
and then the rest?
Okay.
Because depending on whether that gets up or not, it would
All
determine
right, I'm happy to take that. All right, I'm sorry. That's good advice, thank you.
But also split point 1 into 2 contentious issues.
Okay, all right. So we're going to vote on point 1. Do we have an A and a B officially? I just can't see it there.
Sorry, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So just through the Mayor, I'll just make a suggestion as to how you can craft this. So with the following changes, A, delete section 1 and make adjustments to the document. I'd actually make that point 7. So delete section 1 and just say B.
3.11.
3.1.1, excuse me. B, we'll do 3.1.2 and then C, make adjustments to the document to reflect these changes because that applies to both points.
Okay.
Happy with that?
Okay.
And then just vote on A, B, and I'm assuming C would be operative.
Fine, okay. All right, we're happy with that, councillors? So we understand what we're voting on? So in the first point, we're voting on deleting 3.11. Okay, the first one, okay? All right, so we're voting on 1A, councillors, to endorse the draft strategy, but in that point, but to delete section 3.11. Are we clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to put that to the vote, councillors. All in favour of doing so? 1, 2, 3. All against? I declare that carried. The division, yep. Right, so councillors, all those that voted in favour, can you raise your hand and keep it raised until we type that? So we have Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Ali Farnley, Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Carly Hannon. Hands down, councillors. All those against? We have Councillor Riley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Dorney, and Councillor Bolton. Okay. Right, we're now going to vote on 1B and C, I think, councillors. Oh, well, better do B. Okay, better do B. Okay, we're voting on 1B. So just to...
I think it's fine to do them both together. Well,
there might be a little bit... Anyway, we'll do B.
Just do B and then the rest.
Okay, and then we'll do C along with the other. Okay. All right. Okay, councillor, could we just have it up the page? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's 3.1.2. The deletion of 3.1.2. Okay. All those in. We clear? Yep. All those in favour of deleting 3.1.2, raise your hand now. And against? It's the same as before. Division as well, and it's exactly the same as before, and the same ones that were for and against are the same. Just wait till it's cut and paste. Okay, we'll do 1.C, which is basically simply to change the numbering of all the other things. Enacted through the document, to change the numbering as a result through the document. Okay, can I put that to the vote? All those in favour?
Enacting it into...
And okay, I'll just do 1.C. Now we're going to do the rest of the document. Okay, we're going to do 2, 3, 4 and 5.
Oh,
okay, that was just...
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1.C was just a renumber.
Sure.
Okay? Right, so we've got now points 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay? All right. All those in favour? Against? Declare those carried unanimously. Okay. Thank you, councillors. Right, we're moving on to the next item now. DCI 1918, Public Lighting Policy, released for consultation.
Could
Could I just call for a procedural motion for a deferral?
Okay, now, since our change in local laws, a deferral requires a seconder. We have a seconder, Councillor Carly Hannon.
And it should say when.
And yeah, that's right, yes. To the next council meeting. And we do allow debate now, so you can say any reason for that if you want. Okay.
The reason why I'm seeking a deferral is to clarify some points in the report which call for some areas of Moreland to have lights turned off. I hold some concerns about turning lights off in public places, predominantly for safety reasons. And to add to that, I would rather see graffiti in an area than someone feel unsafe or have something happen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carly Hannon, do you want to speak to that? Okay. Everyone clear on the deferral? Anyone want to speak against the deferral?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm supportive of the sentiment, but I think we should just get on with it and deal with the report. So I'm voting against it.
Okay. Right, thank you. All right, okay, I'll put the deferral. Any other speakers? I'll put the deferral to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried, the deferral. Okay, DCI, and that will come to next council meeting. DCI 2018, traffic calming, Ferryman Street, Brunswick West, response to general business item. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I've just lost it for a second. I'll move the recommendation on the report and also include yourself, Mr Mayor, and the South Ward councillors to hear submissions.
I think that's on a later one, actually.
Okay,
so submissions is later. Okay, but you're moving that recommendation? Okay, thank you. And do we have a seconder? Yep, Councillor Riley. Any speaking to this?
No, I won't.
Councillor Riley?
Yes, just quickly, I just want to thank the residents for raising this issue some time back, and the officers have undertaken the investigations and checked on some of those matters. This isn't the end of the day, but it appears that we don't really need to be undertaking any immediate action, but we would like to hear back and we'll continue to monitor the situation and hear back from residents in case we do need to actually readdress this in the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers to this item? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, we move on to DCS 3218, Pigeon Club building at Martin Reserve, Hadfield, response to general business item. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Farnley. Seconder, Councillor Davidson. Any discussion on this? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, the next report we have is DCS 3318, Progress Report on Council's Fossil Fuel Divestment Strategy and Next Steps. Yep.
Yeah, I'd just like to call a procedural and defer this item as well.
Councillor Martin is calling it defer. If I get a seconder, you can say a few words on it if you like. I've got a seconder first. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to what?
Next meeting.
Until the next meeting.
To the next meeting, yes, you do have to. Okay. And did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it. For me, in reading the report, it is clear that the intent of what we're wanting to do with our divestment strategy isn't entirely working in this instance. I would like to look at this policy in a lot more detail and also explore some greater options for us, but I think it is a little bit irresponsible of myself to be creating a motion for this topic on the floor, given that it is of such financial significance to the council.
Thank you. Second, want to speak to it? No. Okay. We'll put the procedural motion for a deferral to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay. Review. The next report is DCS 3418. A review of councillor support policies. You're moving that, Councillor Riley? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Martin, either, would you like to speak to it, mover?
Just that this is a good move to actually try and tidy up and organise possibly 8 or 9 different policies into a much more coherent suite of policies and protocols to guide councils and reports. So I commend the work and thank the officers for bringing it to us.
Thank you very much. And do we have any second like to speak to it?
No.
No. Okay. Any other further discussion? I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCI 2118 Upfield Railway Line Early Service Terminations at Coburg. Response to general business item. Yes,
I'll
Councillor
move
Bolton.
this, but with an amendment which I sent through earlier today.
Can I just have a look at the amendment?
Oh, okay. It's just a small number of words, which is to insert the first point begins. I'm on the wrong page. First point of point 2 includes campaigning for the provision of demand responsive rail replacement bus services. And then I'd like to insert the words, and if a rail replacement bus isn't available, late running trains not terminate at Coburg but complete the service to Upfield.
Okay.
I'll second that.
You're happy to second, Councillor Farnley? Okay. And you may speak to it, Councillor Bolton.
Okay. I would like to speak to it. Obviously, public transport isn't an area that's controlled by Mullen Council. I wish it was, but, so that we could really massively expand public transport. I raised the original motion, general business motion, because it was brought to my attention by residents of Fawkner and North Coburg that a lot of trains were terminating at Coburg at the beginning of this year, leaving people stranded. And, if your train is cancelled or doesn't go the full length of the line, it's not just an inconvenience. It might be for some people, but you can be sacked from your job for turning up late. There's a lot of bosses who sack you even just once turning up late. You can miss that specialist appointment you've waited months for and have to wait months for another one. You can miss your exam. There are all sorts of consequences that can happen through trains not running. I'm moving this amendment because I feel that one of the reasons why the trains are terminating is so that the private company that owns our public transport, which is gouging the public, is basically running the trains short so that they don't get penalised for not running on time. So basically, it's better that the train run late all the way to Upfield rather than not run at all. People who live north of Bakers Road don't have a nice little tram service they can wander down and catch. They're basically stranded. And if you've lost your job, or you might be someone who's on Centrelink, you've got a job agency appointment or a potential job interview and you miss out, or you have your new start axed from underneath you because you haven't turned up at that job agency interview, and those job agencies are ruthless. So this is not just a minor inconvenience. It might be for some people, but some people can have really significant impacts as a result of the trains not running. And then obviously there's the other part of the motion about the duplication of the Upfield line. One, the council officers have found some useful information from Public Transport Victoria, and one of the bits of information which I think is scandalous is that it will be 15 years before we get more frequent trains on the Upfield line, because it's not for another 15 years that the line will be duplicated. So at the moment, for people who live south of Garry Station, they don't, I'll just finish on this sentence, they don't realise that the lack of frequency of trains on the Upfield line is because it's a single track north of Garry and the trains can't pass each other. So we really need to get this project moved forward.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Yep.
To create some clarity for residents about what the issue here is Metro essentially stopping the train short as it goes up the Upfield line at Coburg Station. And the reason that they're doing that is because they're behind schedule, and to make up their time, they'll stop at Coburg Station, at Bell Street, and then run the train straight back into the city. And what that actually means is everyone that lives in Batman and Merlinston and Faulkner and Gowrie and Upfield has to get off at Coburg Station and essentially wait 20 minutes for the next train, and completely inconvenience. Now, I took the train recently from Gowrie, and one of those trains that was supposed to come didn't come at all, so I had to wait 40 minutes for a train. So that's the impact. Now, if you live south of Coburg Station, you might be wondering, I mean, how does that really affect me? The problem with the Upfield line is north of Gowrie Station, there is a single line. What that actually means is you can only really run trains every 20 minutes. The short-term solution to fixing this issue is obviously doing a bit of advocacy work to Metro to make sure that they don't stop trains at Coburg Station. But the long-term solution is making sure that we duplicate the line north of Gowrie Station. We can really only do that with the help of Hume City Council, Moreland City Council advocating together, and I've made that point to councillors before, and I make it again today. Because we can wait 15 years to solve this mess, or we can work together cohesively and advocate to the state government, especially with the upcoming state election, or the next state election, to make sure that the line is duplicated north of Gowrie Station to Upfield Station, all the way to Upfield Station, and potentially even a Campbellfield Station, where a lot of people want to travel north and get off at Campbellfield shops, or the people of Campbellfield currently don't have any public transport. So this is a great opportunity for residents of Hume City Council and Moreland City Council to work together to benefit everyone all the way from Brunswick, all the way up to Upfield and Broadmeadows.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Any further discussion on this topic? There being none, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to DCI 2218, dog waste disposal bag dispenser, second trial. Respond. Yes?
I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 466.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dorney? Councillor Davidson, would you like to speak to it?
Briefly, it's recommending that dog disposable waste bags remain in Richards Reserve and Gilpin Park. So they're the two locations where Moreland will have our first off-leash enclosed dog parks.
Thank you. And Councillor Dorney.
Yeah, I'd just like to commend this report and the recommendations as a dog owner. I'd like to talk to the fact that those bags will actually be compostable as well, which is something that excites me and excites this city that is moving towards zero waste to landfill. And I know that the dog bags is a significant contribution to that, particularly for all the people that love having a dog and walking the dog. So, yeah, really welcome this rollout. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed.
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, I'm just wanting to propose an amendment. I could. Just briefly, that I haven't actually circulated this, but to suggest that Council promote the availability of biodegradable compostable plastic bags. And I do that because the one person I've discussed this with in the last 2 days says that they're very difficult to source. And I just think that as a progressive council, we need to be actually making it a bit easier for people to get the bags. If we're not going to provide them, we should at least be able to encourage businesses and people coming to our city to be able to access the bags from appropriate outlets. So,
is that acceptable to the mover? And
can I just query that? So, do you mean to advise residents where they can purchase these bags and support a particular company selling the bags?
No, it's just to make it available, just to make it more generally available, where they can get them and how they can actually get.
Okay, that's
I'm sure people can buy them online and so on, but not everybody does their online shopping. I just think some of our local shops should be able to make it available.
And a seconder as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right, okay, fine. Okay, that becomes part of the substantive motion now. If it's acceptable to the mover and seconder.
Can we just have biodegradable and compostable? Sorry, it's one of the reasons, because the report actually talks about the fact that some of these bags are being marketed under one badge and they're actually not properly compostable. So I think it's just important that we capture that in the amendment, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yep, sorry, just the CEO's just got a question, a clarification.
Just through the Mayor, we would be interpreting to promote that as through our social media.
Yes.
So that's what you intend as well? Would it be possible to include council promote via social media?
Yes.
Just so it makes it super clear for us.
Promote via social media. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, any further discussion on that? Yes.
Just briefly, I voted against this last time when it came to council, so just for consistency, I'll vote against for it today. And the reason why is
You are allowed to change your mind at any time, but anyway.
The reason why is at the end of the day, I think dog owners should remember to bring bags with them when they intend to take their dog for a walk and pick up their dog's poo. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's what dog owners should really be doing. We shouldn't be providing a service to provide, you know, free dog waste bags for every dog owner. Soon every park maybe we need to start putting dog waste bags. So I think really we need to make sure people are held accountable. And so if you want to take your dog for a walk, you take a bag with you and you clean up after yourself. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, and you want to speak to it?
I'll just briefly, that's what the report is, general thrust is, that people be responsible to bring their own bags, hence my point 3. It's only, officers are really suggesting that we do these 2 sites because of the significance and the number of people coming to our city, and there will be lots of people coming from outside of Moreland to use them, and I just think we can't control for that, and it's a good, I think it's a very useful suggestion from officers to suggest this, so we're kind of furiously in agreement, I think.
Okay. All right. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCS 3518, naming of new cycling pavilion in Brunswick, and Councillor Riley is on his feet.
Yes, and I would like to move this motion with an amendment that we, at point 2, before the word endorses, that we put not, and we delete S after endorses, and after report. Sorry. Have I gone too quick? I've jumped up too early. No, which one are we on?
We're on the naming of the new...
I beg your pardon.
Okay, right, okay. Right,
I removed my motion.
Okay,
I'll
no
come
worries.
back to that.
Okay, that's fine, no worries. So the one we're dealing with is naming of the new cycling pavilion. Moved by Councillor Farnley. You're moving the officer recommendation?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Right, and you're seconding Councillor Bolton? Yes. Any discussion?
Very briefly, it's great to see that we recognise some of the great contributors to our municipality and name some of the infrastructure, pavilions, community facilities after those great contributors. So I'm supportive of the council officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bolton, did you want to speak to it? No. Yes, Councillor Martin.
Just like to say one thing. While I would like to commemorate Alf Walker and his fantastic contribution to the club, I would like to foreshadow that in the future I would like to see our naming policy consider more than one name, because we do have an awful lot of things named after blokes in this city, and I think it's something that we really do need to work on as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Any further discussion? Okay, there being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to DCI 2318, Yarra Trams Route 96 Tram Improvement Project, Nicholson Street, Brunswick East. Councillor Riley is on his feet.
Again, I apologise for that. I hit
That's fine.
I went to the next report instead of the naming of our cycling.
That's fine. That's fine. No worries.
So yeah, just at point 2, we could add in front not endorse. So delete the S, and then at the end of the line, due to the lack of attention to due to the lack of treatment for bicycles on the north-south route.
Okay.
Due to the lack of treatment for bicycle users on the north-south route.
Okay, so, and we've got a seconder in Councillor Martin, so it's quite different to the officer recommendation, I've seen. So would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, look, it was a rather steep learning curve for me when I started reading this report this week. And I actually endorse the easy stops, but I'm very concerned about the fact that we're not actually giving bike users the treatment that they deserve on the Nicholson Street road. It is a principal bike route under the Vic Roads strategy and treatments, but there's been virtually no treatment for the bike users on the north-south, and I'm more than welcoming of the easy stops. Tram route number 96 is going to be the first accessible stop throughout our city, and I'm sure we will get these, and not endorsing this report won't stop that, but I am very concerned that we're actually not giving bike riders the treatment they deserve, particularly when we're putting out our more integrated transport strategy at this time. We're trying to activate alternative users. The report does address bike users that cross Nicholson Street and Tram Route 96, which is fantastic. They don't want to interrupt the east-west routes, and I think that's more than commendable. But I fail to understand why there is no mention whatsoever of bike users going north or south on that road, and I'm actually, at a loss to understand why we haven't actually done slightly better in terms of the consultation around the bike users. And I accept part of my responsibility for not being involved in that consultation as a councillor. I think I've let the city down by not doing that, and that's hence why I'm standing to move that we not endorse it. I'm sure it'll still be done, even whether we endorse it or not. Well, I'll take the officer's advice on that.
Okay, Grant, would you like to inform?
Through the Mayor, the project's a PTV project on a Vic Road, so I imagine they'll keep going.
Okay. All right. Okay. Hang on, I've just got Councillor Martin first. Councillor Martin, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah. Again, in reading this report, I actually had to go through it twice because I was like, oh, I've missed the cycling route in this. It's got to be an attachment or an appendix, or it's in there somewhere. And went through it again, and if you don't talk about it, maybe they think that cyclists won't use the road, or I'm not really quite sure what the thinking is, but we've just endorsed a MITS with 120 odd recommendations, and as part of that, it is to actually encourage people to get out on the bike, to get active and get active transport. And it is just baffling that bicycles are left out. And it seems to be kind of a common theme with PTV lately that cyclists and PTV has to work against each other, which is a bit baffling. So I really do hope that they do take this on board and they come back to us with at least some further references to the cycling route being there. And I also would like to state that Yarra Trams, let's get DDA accessible tram stops across every single route in this city because they are really much needed.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bolton.
I've really got more of a question, possibly both to the movers and also the director. So firstly, the question to the director through the Mayor, I was wondering what discussion has occurred between council and Yarra Trams about provision for cycling.
Through the Mayor, there's been a long history of discussions on this project as the report outlines. I'm not aware of all the ins and outs of that, but there would have been discussions at some point about bicycles. As council will recall, when the Bly Street stop was done, that issue, the bike lane disappeared at that point because of the narrowing of the lanes. So the subject of bikes and how they interact with these accessible stops would have been on the mind and part of those discussions. But at the end of the day, the PTV on a Vic Roads project are proposing what you have in front of you.
Okay, yes, Councillor.
I'd like to propose an extra point 3, that if the project goes ahead, that a report come back to council recommending some measures to make cycling safer on the street.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to accept that suggestion. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bolton, could you repeat that again a bit slowly for the minute taker?
So it's an extra point 3, but if this project goes ahead, that a report comes back to council with recommendations about making cycling safer on Nicholson Street. It's just, I felt it's a bit inadequate, you know, because the project will probably go ahead, and we need something to happen.
Okay, thank you. And it's acceptable to the mover and seconder, so it becomes a substantive motion. Anyone like to speak to an aspect of it? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm going to speak against this motion, partly because I do believe that it is going to happen anyway, but more so because I just think to say that no, we do not accept your design is probably not acceptable for me. We are in a process now where they are consulting and we could participate in that. And I do believe it's just closed. But to be able to offer suggestions would be helpful. To just say, look, we don't support the plan, I don't think it's good, because what is happening, you're seeing upgrades and you're seeing disability accessible stops, surely a good thing. To just say, no, we do not accept this, I don't know whether it's the most effective communication that we could have. I mean, from people I've spoken to, people are looking forward to actually having disability accessible stops, and they do recognise that making sure that trams are accessible for everyone is important, and they do recognise there will be significant safety improvements with the upgrade. So I do know that more needs to be done in regards to cycling safety, and perhaps if we were to suggest some of those improvements, it would be better than to just say your report is not good enough. And I'm just reading, I could give you some comments from the website about what residents have said. You know, and I quote, "I'm very excited for this upgrade and the opportunity it will create for many of my friends and family in wheelchairs to get around Melbourne just like everyone else. This is about access, accessibility and fairness. And I really would have thought that we should have done more to engage with the process, tell them what's wrong with it, tell them how it could be improved, as opposed to just saying we don't accept your plans." I mean, so many people are looking forward to the implementation. I can quote more. Another resident, "I'm looking forward to have these upgrades implemented soon. The current tram stop situation on Nicholson Street is unsafe for passengers boarding and disembarking the tram." End quote. I mean, there's so many residents that are looking forward to this. It would benefit them. And I think we should have done more than just say that we don't endorse your plans.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Carly Hannon.
So I'll also speak against this motion, and I think I'll foreshadow that if this doesn't get up, that we move to endorse the Aerotram's design, and that we also have another point to have a letter from our mayor to the minister raising concerns around the treatment of bicycle users in not being in the design.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. We've noted that, and if this was unsuccessful, we'll move to your first shadow motion. All right. Any further discussion? Councillor Farley.
Yes, I think Councillor Tapanos and Councillor Carly Hannon's approach is better in this instance. Instead of saying, no, we don't support these upgrades to the tramworks, let's support the upgrades to the tramworks and then advocate in addition that we want additional thought put into the bicycle east-west and north-south movement and strategy associated with these areas. So I'm supportive of Councillor Carly Hannon's foreshadowed approach, so I will vote against this one and then support the foreshadowed motion.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Would the mover like to close? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the report actually is quite explicit and quite positive on the east-west links. I actually read the report. This is about the south-north directions of the route, and I'm also sort of cognizant of the Mayor's already criticised some of these authorities regarding the Melville Street, the Melville Road, easily accessible stop tonight. So I'm looking forward to the Mayor's support on this, because here we are. I have on the record forever around accessible tram stops, and I will continue to endorse that, and I don't think that this motion is going to have any effect on that. What this is saying is essentially that their consultation has fallen short. The other thing is that I assumed, and I'm looking at one of our members in the gallery tonight, that one of our bike advocacy groups would have been involved in this. They weren't. Why weren't they? The reason they weren't was because there's so much attention going on Sydney Road which is not going to have accessible stops in the near future or in the foreseeable future because the state government won't bite the bullet on it. And there's all this attention on Sydney Road. We've spent hours and hours of officers' time developing that. I assumed, wrongly, that we would have had better consultation from our bike advocate group, who haven't done their job as well as I thought, so I'm not particularly pointing the finger at them. They do a good job in many areas. I'm surprised, and that's why I want to send a message to the state government that this is not good enough. I'm also need to alert you, it's not just them. Bike Network Victoria actually think this is Bike Network Victoria think this is okay. They're the principal bike advocacy group for the state, and this is a principal bike network that's been designated. So I just think we need to send a strong message to the state government because it's not good enough and their consultation processes aren't good enough. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm hoping that people will support this motion for the intention that it is. The work will continue. We do need to get better input from ourselves and our residents on these consultations. I know the residents have spoken because of their entries and parkways and their parking have all been taken care of, you can be sure of that. And yes, they did give the east-west routes some consideration, but I'm just kind of dumbfounded that they haven't given the north-south routes any attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Riley. As a mover, that closes the debate. I'll put Councillor Riley's motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Division, thanks.
Call for a division by Councillor Riley. So those who are in favour, could you raise your hand, please, and keep it up. Councillors Riley, Martin, Kavanagh, Dorney, Davidson, and Bolton. Those who are against, could you raise your hands now? Councillors Tapanos, Finley, Carly Hannon. That's it. Thank you, councillors. Okay, councillors, DCS 3618, proposed discontinuance and sale of right of way adjoining 5 Mackay Street, Brunswick. I think Councillor Tapanos, you wanted to
Yes, I'll move this motion, thank you, and add in point 4, I think, the Mayor and South Ward councillors.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're appointing in dot point 4 Councillor Kavanagh as Chair and Councillors Riley, Dorney and Tapanos. Thank you. Sorry, do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Riley. Okay. Any discussion on this?
No, not really. We're just starting the process really, so I look forward to seeing community consultation and submissions on this.
Thank you very much. Okay, you're right. I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. The next report is DSD 2018 Community Grants Program 1819 recommendations. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dorney. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davidson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
Just really briefly, I think that some fantastic new projects have been successful in this round of funding. I would like to just let those in the gallery and those listening tonight know, and to spread the word, that we have fallen short on both the project grants and the capital works grants this year. So there will be a second round of funding for both. So just watch this space. That will be from the 12th of July until the 26th of August. And there'll be more timelines on Facebook and on the website and things as after tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Councillor Davidson?
I'll just briefly add, it's really pleasing to see the submissions that we've received, and also the fact that these groups and these people are encouraging the community to come together to help each other and enable greater things to happen. So I look forward to witnessing all the wonderful things that the grants that we provide enable to occur.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, do you have any further discussion on that? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Yeah. Okay. The next report we have to consider this evening is DCS 3718, Financial Management Report for period ending the 31st of May 2018, moved by Councillor Riley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Family. And would like to speak to Councillor Riley.
Just briefly, I just want to commend this report. It's a very positive report at the end of May, and we've still got a month to go before we finalise the financial year. But at this stage, we're $11 million better off than we thought we would be. And if that trend continues to the end of the year, most of that money, or large sums of it, will go into our reserve for capital works for things like significant project reserve, as it's officially called, and it'll go to Wheatsheaf Hub and Max Saxon Street multi-use facility and things like that. I just think this shows the strength of the council, the position the council's in, and the good work that officers are doing in delivering on our revenue side as well as our expenditure side. And finally, it's important to note that our infrastructure spend this year has almost doubled to about $46.1 million for capital expenditure, even though it's $8 million behind what we forecast. We're spending almost twice as much as we spent in the previous year, and there's probably more than we've ever spent in this area. Again, a sign of the kind of work and endeavour that we're undertaking. Not to mention the new aquatic centre at Oak Park, which is ever shining on the horizon for the people on the western side of the city. So we're out there recently, and it was a fantastic setup so far. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to sliding down that slide with many thousands of others, I'm sure, and the views you get to see before that. So anyway, that's an aside. So I just commend this report. In a rate-capped environment, it's a really positive outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Farley? No. Any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to DCS 3818, Governance Report, July 2018, moved by Councillor Farnley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tapanos? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Farnley?
Yep, the governance report is a great report. The governance report, I guess, since the appointment of Council Officer Sally Curran, the governance report in particular, it's just been shooting through the roof. I feel super governed, so thank you very much to the Council Officer for her work.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Tapanos? No. Any other speakers? Being no other speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report we have to consider this evening is DCI 2418, Contract 709T, Road Reconstruction of Mitchell Parade, Pascoe Vale South, between Bob Avenue and Reynard Street. Yep. Moved by Councillor Martin. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dorney. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Martin?
Just briefly, and I thank the other councillors that looked at me then and smiled. Many councillors here are aware how much I enjoy procurement and how much I'm looking forward to the new procurement policy coming into play. This was done under the old policy, so I am looking forward to the new procurement policy coming into play, and I'm also looking forward to the new reports coming to council highlighting some of the things that we've put into our new procurement policy.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorney, do you want to speak to it? Okay, any other discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to notices of motion. Councillors, I ask that you start by stating your motion, and then if you have a second, to provide a brief background. The first notice of motion this evening is notice of motion 2818, the Honourable Bob Hawke, AC, GCL, Commemorative Public Art Mural. The mover of this motion, the submitter, is Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receives a report on the feasibility of commissioning a public art mural in commemoration of the Honourable Bob Hawke within the City of Moreland.
Now, does Councillor Tapanos have a second to that motion? Councillor Farnley. Right, you may speak to it now, Councillor Tapanos, if you wish.
Thank you. Councillors, we as a city pride ourselves on creating a artistic and vibrant community, and we certainly have a lot of artists in our municipality. So I believe it would be just right to take this opportunity to commission a piece of work on the Honourable Bob Hawke, who everyone would know was our local member for Wills, but of course was also the leader of the trade union movement and Prime Minister. Bob Hawke has a lot of achievements, both local and of course as Prime Minister of this country, whether that's economic reforms, floating the dollar, superannuation, Medicare, and I think it's right that we take the time now to acknowledge his contributions in his lifetime. So I think it's there's been some talk in regards to the amount of money, but I think to get a quality piece of artwork, we do need to allocate significant resources to be able to get the best possible artists, because I do believe that this mural would attract a lot of people to our city, and people will come to Sydney Road and to actually see the mural, and hopefully also shop and enjoy our local restaurants and so forth. So I believe it will also add to the economic, local economy of our city. So councillors, I endorse this, and I look forward to a future report coming about Bob Hawke and whether it should be a mural or what kind of public art it should be and how he should be portrayed.
Thank you, Councillor. The seconder, would you like to speak to Councillor Farnley?
Am I able to speak if there's anyone against? Is that...
You can, if someone speaks against you, you don't get the right to close it, but you can speak at that point if you want.
Yeah, I'll just wait.
Is anyone like to speak against the motion? Yep.
Thank you. I rise to speak against the motion. To be honest, people in this city expect us to spend our money on so many other things other than spending $30,000 of ratepayers' money on a giant Bob Hawke in the city. I'm more than happy for Councillor Tapanos to paint a giant Bob Hawke in his living room so he can stare at it and draw the crowds to his living room. But I really do think that there are better ways that we can spend our money in the city. We've had conversations where we're looking to get, more, we're looking to fix the waste, issues that we're having. There's so many broader things. And for every person that's come up to me and said roads, rates and rubbish, and if I was to point to a giant Bob Hawke, somewhere, maybe it might draw some of the local members out and they might be able to have a look at it. But really, we have other priorities in the city, and I think we really should focus on them first.
Okay. Is there a speaker for the motion? Okay, speaker against?
Yeah, look, I just want to rise to speak against this too. Look, as much as I think, I don't have any crosswords to say about Bob Hawke, I do have an issue around us. We've just finished our budget in the last month or two, and then just the timing of this, I think, is less than fortunate. And so I think that given that we've just closed off the budget, I am scratching my head literally, wondering why it's coming right now. The other issue that I have been working on is around anti-graffiti work and working with communities in our city around this. And I know that the application we assisted them to make last year was something around this value. It was around 25,000, 30,000. If I'm not wrong, I can't remember if the officers can remind me, but it was something like that. You have to go through a whole process and a whole effort to get your hands on that money to actually do good to address a graffiti issue. And at the same time, those kinds of programs are trying to promote artists and their work and to fill up some of these walls so that they're not being desecrated by graffiti. I just can't understand why this isn't fitting in better with some of our other programs and our projects, and why we have to actually designate somebody to do it. I think if it was calling for a much broader report on other significant players in our city and people with history, and particularly some people who aren't white men, then I'd probably be much more interested in supporting it. And I think that if there are many blank walls in our city that could do with lots of public art on them, and I'd like to see some of them stump up and suggest that they could actually offer their walls and perhaps put some money in their pocket, or even do a crowd fundraiser. Or what's that thing called that the state government are running right now? Oh, pick my project. It didn't get picked last month, so maybe we could pick it this month.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Farley.
Oh, look, councillors, this is just calling for a report at this stage. I mean, let's take a look at what the report comes back with. I welcome Councillor Martin's sudden concern around expenditure and being prudent with our rates. I do agree with him that we need to be prudent with our what we spend our ratepayers' money on. But this is calling for a report. Maybe the report will come back and suggest that we partner with some local groups who will donate or volunteer their time as part of it. So I don't think we really should be politicising this too much with the former Prime Minister as a subject. So let's just go through the report and then we'll see what sort of comes out of it.
Councillor Doherty.
Just very quickly against, in terms of the resource that is actually proposed in this notice of motion and the resource that's actually included in preparing a report, you would provide that there's actually a lot of officer hours that do go into preparing a report that is taken away from other council business that's addressing our council plan as well. So just to correction on that.
Okay. From the chair, I'd like to propose an amendment. I'd like to propose an amendment that any artwork features all federal members for Wills: Bill Bryson, Gordon Bryant, Bob Hawke, Phil Cleary, Calvin Thompson and Peter Khalil. And is that acceptable to the mover?
No, it's not acceptable. I can detail why.
Yep.
Look, I think that it is nice to acknowledge all of our federal members, and we can possibly do that at another time. But I think we do need to recognise that Bob Hawke stands aside as a Prime Minister. He has a significant contribution, which I mentioned before, and I do believe he needs to be the front and centre of this. And I just don't think it would work by adding the other members in there. But I would like to see other ways in which we can acknowledge their contribution. But I think this is particularly about Bob Hawke, and we should leave it as such.
Thank you. Okay, so it's not acceptable to the mover and seconder. So do I have a seconder? I obviously don't, so that lapses for want of a seconder. That's fine. Okay. Yep, no worries. So we'll continue on with the debate then. Okay. Anyone else like to enter into this debate? Okay. Yes, you want to close the debate?
I'm a little bit surprised from the opposition to this motion, and I certainly did not expect to hear the rates, roads and rubbish argument from my fellow councillors tonight, considering what this municipality has always stood for. And I do believe that it is important that we recognise our local history, and he was our local member, and it is important that that local history includes the political history of the area. I know that the opposition has been expressed in terms of financial. However, I do believe that that allocation could be brought down significantly by contributions from the business community and others, but also it may not all be taken up. It is only a report at this stage. So I would ask that if your concern is financial, to not vote this down now, but to actually get in the future report a more detailed analysis of the finances. I am a little bit disappointed if this is all political. I think that people who reach the office of Prime Minister in their retirement and in recognising their contribution should stand beyond politics. Jeff Kennett thinks it's a great idea. I'm disappointed that the Greens don't. Perhaps if it was Adam Banks, another white male, they might have a different view. But I think at the moment that this should be supported and that we could have a look at how we can fund it, what are the details in regards to funding into the future. And I also like to note that in the past, the Greens have always supported our artists, our local artists, our art strategy, which endorses projects like this, and our graffiti strategy, which endorses projects like this. I would hate to think that this is a movement away from those policy positions.
Okay, all right, so that closes the debate. So I'll put Councillor Tapanos's notice of motion to vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that lost.
Shame.
You say shame?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't think Darren Hinch was a local member. That's okay. All right, shame, shame, shame. All right, we're moving on to notice of motion 2918, better amenity in medium density, and that's Councillor Farnley's notice of motion.
Thank you. I'll move a slight alternative based on some feedback from some councillors.
Okay. Would you like to read that then for the benefit of the gallery and those
so this
watching?
is to replace the existing motion that's in the agenda, but it reads, as part of the medium density housing review, council officers prepare a report for the October 2018 council meeting that examines how council can influence a reduction of density within medium density areas.
Okay, and have a seconder, Councillor Martin. Yep.
If you live in Glenroy, Pascoe Vale, Hadfield, Fawkner, the number one issue that those residents raise with us as councillors is the overdevelopment in those areas. And in fact, if I remember correctly, one of my fellow councillors during the campaign actually ran with the slogan, community need, not developer greed, which really tapped into the frustration that residents were feeling with the overdevelopment in the area. And what's really causing that frustration is if you live in Pascoe Vale and cross Moonee Ponds Creek and head into Strathmore, what you've got there is when one house gets knocked down, maybe 2 homes get built. Whereas in Pascoe Vale and Glenroy, when one home gets knocked down, 3 or 4 units get built. And it's one rule for one side of Moonee Ponds Creek and one rule for the other side. And it's really, really frustrating. What I'm seeking to do is find ways in which we can reduce the amount of density that is going on in medium density areas. I've realised that we can't stop development completely. I've voted against a number of applications that come to council and I've been excluded from those votes, and ultimately those developers have got their permits anyway, whether through council or through VCAT. So we can't stop development from happening, and I don't think the residents want to stop development from happening, but we just want better development. Instead of one home getting knocked down and 4 units popping up in its place, potentially 2 homes, a duplex, better development. Now, we have statistics that show in Moreland, families are leaving our municipality in droves. We've got statistics at the start of the year that show families are leaving our area in droves. And it's no wonder. Who wants to raise their family in a 2-bedroom unit, squashed between 2 other units with no backyard? No family wants to live in that environment. We are really letting down our suburbs, and we need to find ways and solutions to solve this issue. I've waited 18 months, I've consulted the planning officers, I've waited for the medium density review before taking this action. I've been patient, but now we need to push ahead and find solutions. One of those suggestions I have is looking at the planning scheme and looking at any potential blockers that stop duplexes from going up. Now, we'll have a bit more of a broader look at different levers that we can pull rather than be specific, but that's what this motion seeks to do. How can we encourage less density but still continue development, but less density and not give developers everything that they're going for?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin?
And I rise to support Councillor Farnley, and this is something that we have spoken quite a bit about because it is a concern for the residents of the North West Ward. It is a concern when you have a house go down and you have 9, 10 units go up, and you know they're quite frankly the most ugly things that you could ever see. And people have to live near them. People have to deal with all sorts of issues arising from this. I don't step away from acknowledging the fact that we are growing as a municipality and that there are places for people to move into the city and you know, denser around some of our activity centres. But there are points through this, you know, medium density areas where it is getting a bit ridiculous. So I do thank Councillor Farnley for broadening his scope of this, and really we can look at the many levers that we have, whether or not it's looking at design excellence, architectural excellence, looking at things like passive design, change the orientation of houses that not only improve the amenity and the visual, the neighbourhood character, it actually improves the home for people living inside them. And so this is really where we want to go as a council. We've initiated things like looking into a design excellence scorecard. We're looking at all the available tools that we have as a council to really try and influence this space, to really get high quality, good development in our city, because it's what we all want to see as councillors and it's what the community want to see.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion on this? Yes, Councillor Rowley.
I just need to speak because of one of the comments made by the mover of this motion that some families don't want to live in a place without a backyard. I'd invite him to come down and speak to some of the families that I teach and work with and some of my colleagues who are quite happily moving into apartments, and that's a choice they're making. So just as an inclusive city, I just think we just need to temper some of our comments around that, because that may well be the case in your community and many people feel that way, and I'm not disputing that, but there are people who are quite obviously choosing to live in different kinds of living, and I'm sure that they're providing, and I certainly hope they provide lots of outdoor experiences for them, and that's one of the reasons why we have a park close to home, to make sure that we're actually doing that where we're putting up some of these apartments. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix, because I think it's important to realise that we're catering to a whole range of families and communities.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Any other discussion? Yes, you can close the debate. Did anyone speak against? No, no one's spoken against, so you don't get to close. He just he's voting for the motion.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So therefore, there's no right of reply. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Notice the motion 3018 overshadowing, and the mover of this motion and submitter is Councillor Bolton.
So this is a motion to advocate to the state government to amend the RES code, the planning scheme, to measure overshadowing at the winter solstice in the middle of winter rather than the spring equinox. It also notes that...
I'm sorry, Councillor Bolton, just get a seconder first.
Oh, sorry,
Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Davidson. Yeah, sorry, go Councillor Bolton. Thank you.
It also notes that Council is conducting a Moreland planning scheme review, committing Council to undertake work to determine how to limit overshadowing of open and public spaces. And that work is due to come back to Council, I think, next year. And also to consider revisions to our local policy in terms of protecting open space. So as I've got a second, I can sort of speak to it now.
Yes.
This motion was really provoked by the debate at the Urban Planning Committee, at the last Urban Planning Committee, around a 14-storey development that was proposed for the corner of Park Street and Sydney Road, which would have overshadowed Princes Park to a considerable amount. And it was apparent that Melbourne City Council has more protection over its open spaces from overshadowing. And I do remember an issue at Moreland City Council when it was discovered that most of the state library lawns would be overshadowed in the middle of winter to a fair degree. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of what the City of Melbourne has done, but I do know that residents are really frustrated and really angry often about the fact that, the overshadowing is measured from spring in September and not from the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice in July. And so I just really think Moreland needs to try and change things. Now, the RES code, this is state government. Moreland doesn't have control over it, but I certainly think Moreland needs to adopt a position that it strongly advocates for the RES code to measure overshadowing from the middle of winter, the solstice, rather than the spring equinox. And also, the part that we have some control over is overshadowing of local open space. and a public open space. And I think I certainly will be advocating when that review comes back to council that we adopt the winter solstice rather than the spring equinox as the time that we measure overshadowing from. I mean, I think it is really difficult. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor. All right, thank you. And the second there was Councillor Davidson, I think. Do you want to speak?
I think Councillor Bolton explained that very well, and as Councillor Bolton said, it really became apparent to me about the application that came before the Urban Planning Committee, where overshadowing would have quite damaging effects over Princess Park, and it's something that I don't want to see in our municipality. I was impressed with the other council's position on it, and I think that it's something that we should adopt.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor, the next is notice of motion 3118, public housing, public meeting. Councillor Bolt.
So this motion is calling for council to hold a public meeting in the Brunswick Town Hall in late August, early September to inform and engage residents in respect to the issues and consequences of the public housing renewal program, and to allocate funds to display a banner on council property supporting the campaign to stop the demolition of public housing estates, and produce and distribute posters and leaflets promoting the public meeting, to use the council city news page in the Moreland Leader to promote the public meeting, and spend no more than $5,000 enacting the parts of the decision that are not included in the council budget.
That's the motion, and whoever seconded? Sorry, Councillor Riley. Now you may speak to it, Councillor Bolt.
Well, just earlier we heard from someone in the public gallery who lives very close to the Grand Place public housing estate, and just recently there was a public meeting of about 50 people at the public housing estate, and Councillor Riley was also present. There is a lot of concern in the local community amongst people who know what's happening at Grand Place. There are a number of people, at the local school, parents who've got kids who go to school with kids that come from the Grand Place estate. There is a lot of concern in the local community about poorer people being pushed out of the municipality through the plans to totally demolish this estate. People are gradually starting to become aware that a lot of the families won't be able to come back to this estate because those 3-bedroom flats will be converted into 1- and 2-bedroom flats. And actually already on this estate, some of the single-parent families who are relocated to enable demolition have come back to the Grand Place estate because the Department of Housing couldn't find anywhere for them to live. So this is a recent development. I think we really do need to inform the broader community what's happening with these estates, so that people, not just the public housing tenants themselves, but the broader public becomes aware, but also tenants in other estates who've got concerns. The public meeting at Grand Place the other week, there were tenants from other public housing estates, including some that are not slated for demolition, but they want to know what's happening.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Riley? No. Any other speakers on this? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote.
No,
yes, you speak. Sorry, Councillor Tapanoff.
Yeah, I'm going to speak against this motion. I think that people know my views in regards to the renewal project that is occurring in Grand Place. I think we dealt with a report earlier today which spoke about strategic advocacy to the state government. I just don't know whether this type of advocacy, which is not strategic, is the best way to go in order to get the outcome that we want. There are significant benefits to having Grand Place upgraded. I will ask those who are campaigning against the upgrade project whether they've actually gone in and seen the state of disrepair of Grand Place, and actually spoken to residents and other stakeholders in the industry effectively, because I believe there is a lot of support in the community in regards to the upgrade program. We spoke a lot today about money and budgeting. I see $5,000 here. That is not included in the adopted council budget, but I've got no doubt that when it comes to politics, that there are some councillors here that would be happy spending the community's money to promote their political campaigns.
Speak to the motion, please, councillor.
I am. It's dot point 4. So yes, I'm going to not support this, and I don't support the additional allocation for it, and I don't believe it is the right campaign for Moreland City Council to be running. It's certainly not strategic, and it does our reputation with the state government, with the big projects that we dealt with earlier today in our strategic advocacy report, a disservice.
Okay, yes, Councillor Riley.
Sorry. Just briefly, I would urge councillors to revisit our policies on affordable housing and the decades of work that we've done on this area. Public housing is not our domain, but as I said earlier tonight, it's somehow become council domain after 20 years or more of neglect by our other levels of government, namely federal and state. I must say that the request for the grant for this money actually came just as the budget was closing, and we were actually advised by officers to put it through in this way. So in fact it was attempted to be considered at that point. Yeah, it might have been a late item, but we did try and consider it at that point, and I think that it's a relatively small amount of money. The other point I just want to make is that I'm not against upgrading our walk-ups or any other public housing. I'm actually, and I think the rest of our councillors, if I speak for them, they are all advocating that we actually spend more and do more, and that we just don't do it through this particular program, which is actually seeing the privatisation of significant amounts of public open space, and a reduction in the number of larger dwellings for people in public housing, not to mention many other arguments which I won't go into now, but we've already had those debates and we've made decisions about trying to improve the outcomes in this program, and we've advocated about that, and I think we could still do that. This is one way of trying to garner more support publicly for it as well.
Are there any other speakers? Just before we close the debate, I'd like to say a couple of things on this. I congratulate Councillor Bolton on this motion. I thank her for advocacy all the way through on public housing tenants. And I do believe that if we can't look after her and have a public meeting for the most vulnerable citizens at the time when they're at the lowest ebb with the way they've been treated by this program, I think there's something wrong with this council. So I fully support this. Okay. You want to go? You can go. Yep, before we go.
I just wanted to follow those comments up.
Yep.
Because I don't think having a different position necessarily means you don't empathise with people that are living within Gron Estate. It's just we have a different opinion of how we actually get to the final outcome, which is a renewal program. So I just wanted to clarify those comments. It kind of sounded to me like if you're not supportive of it, then you simply don't care about people that live in that estate, which I don't think is fair to Councillor Tapanos and I, and any councillor that has just a different opinion and approach on how to get a final outcome, which is renewal of that estate.
Okay. And anyone else want to speak? As a mover, did you want to? There's been speakers against, so you're welcome to close the debate.
Firstly, I think the residents of Gron Place are part of the Moreland community. They are our citizens. We represent them as well as people who might be in private rental and own their own houses or buying their houses or whatever from the bank. It is part of our core business because Moreland has long-term policies of commitment to affordable housing, which has been really eradicated in large sections of Moreland. The eviction of these residents from an inner city estate is basically like a form of social engineering. It's basically saying that poor people aren't allowed to live in the inner city because this is all about, this is not about renewing public housing. It's not about repairs. People are not opposed to repairs and renewing public housing. You don't need to bulldoze an entire estate to renew public housing. You can do it a block at a time. They do this in the high rises. They don't knock down a whole high rise block of public housing. They renovate or refurbish one flat or a floor of flats at a time. So you don't need to destroy a community, and that is why a lot of public housing tenants on the estates, including Grand Place, are resisting or refusing to sign relocation agreements, because they don't want to lose their community, because that's part of it as well. It's actual retaining that community.
Thank you, Councillor. That closes the debate. Would Councillor Bolton's notice a motion to the vote? All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Division, thanks.
Calling for Councillor Riley has called for a division. So the councillors who voted in favour, could you raise your hand, please? Councillor Riley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Kavanagh, Dorney, Davidson, Bolton. And against, could you raise your hands, please? Tapanos, Farnley and Carly Hannon. Thank you. Notice of motion 3218, council representation at City's Power Partnership Summit. The mover of the motion is Councillor Dorney. It's as it's printed in the agenda, is it, Councillor Dorney? Or
as it's printed.
Yeah.
Do I need to read it out?
Not if it says it's printed, that's fine. Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Riley. Okay, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
Yeah, just briefly. So this was something that could have gone in the governance report, but just due to the timing, I've decided to put a notice of motion through just to see if there was support. It's for my attendance at the Cities Power Partnership Summit, which is being held in New South Wales. The theme this year, so it's a climate action conference, the theme this year is around accelerating local action, so underlining the crucial role local leadership and the fact that visible concrete action on climate change is supported by ratepayers and residents around the country. So it's just helping share those stories of best practice that's happening around the nation, as well as bringing people together to just discuss ways and have debates on how we can progress this work further. It will be,
That's fine.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Councillor Riley, did you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, I believe this is within the allocated budget that we have determined that councillors can access for conferences and things of this nature. It's just really making sure that we're being transparent and that interstate travel had to be approved as part of it. So I just wanted to give that little bit of background, which is in the minutes, but I just think it was important to understand why it's coming in this form.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Any other speakers? Councillor Farley?
Just briefly, I think Councillor Dawn is a fantastic addition to council since her appointment. This isn't anything personal. I just wouldn't support this if it was Councillor Tapanos or Riley, whoever it may be. So I'm voting against, but nothing personal.
Thank you. All right. Any other discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay. Now, councillors, that concludes the items. We move to foreshadowed items. This is the first time this has been on the agenda. It's an opportunity, if you wish to foreshadow, and it's not binding, but to give any indication of any notice of motion that you might be intending to raise at the next council meeting. Has anyone got anything to say? Okay, so we'll move on. Now, before I close the meeting, councillors, I just want to bring something to your attention and seek some clarification. The CEO has brought to my attention that what was moved during the MITS, we're just a little bit unsure, but it was a bit different to previous discussion. So as Chair, I seek the consent of Council to hear and consider this clarification. The point that was deleted, that was 3.2.1, does not instruct officers as to whether they should continue the 40k rollout or not. I assume the intention was to continue with the 40k rollout, but I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Am I correct in assuming that council still wants to continue the 40k rollout? I realise some want to go down to 30, but we don't want to stop the 30k rollout, do we?
The 40, don't.
The 40k rollout. Could I have a motion? Could I have a motion saying that we wish to continue the rollout of 40k an hour speed zones? Moved by Councillor Tapanos, seconded by Councillor Riley. All right. Can I put that to the vote? All those in favour of continuing the 40k rollout of speed zones? Good. Can that be listed as unanimous, please? I thought that was the intention, but we just want to make sure. Yep, that's fine. Thank you very much. Now, in doing that, I now need a motion to close the council meeting to the public. Moved by Councillor Farnley, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. I now declare the council meeting closed to the public. I'd like to thank the gallery attendees and thank those who are watching live streaming for your interest in council matters, and respectfully request that kindly leave the chamber, and I wish you all a good night. Meeting closed to the public.